She doesn't reject you because you're too honest. She rejects you because you're too predictable. Most men think being good, open, and sincere will win loyalty. But Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He believed most people, especially those closest to you, are not drawn to virtue, but to power, mystery, and the will to rise above weakness. In this video, you won't find cheap tricks or modern dating games. What you will find are cold, brilliant insights from the mind of Friedrich Nietzsche. Insights that help you see through deception, reclaim self-respect, and move through life with a quiet, ruthless edge. If this is your first time on our channel, hit subscribe and comment which philosopher you want us to explore next. Need is the death of power. The moment she senses that you need her more than she needs you, the dynamic tilts irreversibly. Nietzsche didn't write dating advice, but he understood the nature of power and dependence better than anyone. In his world, relationships were never equal. They were always negotiations of strength, will, and leverage. When you need her more, you've handed over the negotiating table before the conversation even begins. Attraction thrives in tension. Tension between closeness and distance, between mystery and availability, between admiration and detachment. When a man needs a woman more than she needs him, that tension collapses. There is no dance left, only pursuit, only submission. And submission, unless it is powerfully framed and self-chosen, is repulsive to the feminine psyche. It feels like desperation, even when disguised as love. To need is to lack something, but women are not drawn to men who lack. They're drawn to men who overflow. Men who walk with purpose, not because someone is watching, but because it is simply who they are. Nietzsche would argue, if your love turns into need, it's no longer noble, it's hunger, and hunger leads to resentment. You become the beggar outside her temple, not the fire that draws her to warmth. Many men confuse consistency with need. They text constantly, offer affection too freely, adjust their schedules at the slightest signal, all in the name of love, when in truth, it's fear. The fear of losing her, of not being enough, of being alone. And that fear translates. It drips into every interaction, every pause, every smile that lingers too long. She doesn't feel safe with it. She feels suffocated by it. A man who doesn't need her, who chooses her, offers something rare. His presence is voluntary. His affection is earned. His time is sacred. And that makes his love more valuable, not less. Nietzsche understood this economy of value. Anything abundant becomes cheap. Anything easily controlled becomes boring. And when a woman feels she can predict your every move, she will eventually test your need. Not maliciously, but instinctively. She'll cancel plans. Go cold. Flirt with absence. Not to destroy you, but to see if you collapse. That is the moment of truth. Will you fold, chase, over-explain, apologize for existing? Or will you remain composed, self-contained, unshaken? If you've built your world around her, you'll fall. If she's orbiting your world, one you would live fully in with or without her, she'll feel it. She may not admit it. She may not even like it at first, but she'll respect it. And in the long game, respect is the only soil where desire grows. You are not here to be her emotional crutch, her therapist, or her source of self-worth. You are here to live well, with or without her. And that, paradoxically, makes her want to stay. Never be the one who needs her more. Be the one who could walk away and means it. When she tests you, it's not because she wants to hurt you. It's because she wants to feel you. Not your emotions, not your explanations, your strength. And this is where most men fail, especially those who confuse emotional availability with influence. Nietzsche understood that beneath the polite rules of society lies a primal truth. We are all drawn to what we respect, not what pleases us, not what agrees with us, but what stands firm when the world pushes. A woman's tests are rarely direct. They come as sarcasm, as mood swings, as irrational complaints. They come when she's silent for no reason, or when she picks a fight right after a perfect day. These are not signs that she's broken. They're signals. Signals that she's watching how you hold your frame. She's looking for a wall to lean on, not a puddle to drown in. She wants to know, can you handle her chaos without losing your center? Because deep down, every woman knows that life isn't soft. Life throws storms, deaths, betrayals, and disappointments. And if you, as her partner, crumble under emotional tension, how will you stand when real crisis hits? She doesn't want reassurance through words. She wants to feel it through your presence, your steadiness, your ability to look into her storm without flinching. This is why being too nice doesn't work. When you're always accommodating, always agreeing, always yielding, in the name of peace, you slowly erode her respect. You teach her that you fear conflict more than you value self-respect. And once she senses that, she knows you're not a man she can lean on. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But if your why becomes pleasing her at the cost of your backbone, then your how will always be submission. Strength in this context doesn't mean aggression. It doesn't mean dominance or emotional detachment. It means unshakable composure. It means you don't get baited by every test. You don't raise your voice to prove your point. You don't beg for her to understand you. Instead, you lead the emotional rhythm of the relationship. You absorb her fire without flinching and respond with clarity, not reaction. She may call you cold, distant, arrogant. That's part of the test. She wants to see if you'll break to gain her approval. But if you pass the test, if you remain grounded, calm, and deeply rooted in your self-worth, she'll feel something even more powerful than affection: trust. And once trust is established, real intimacy can finally emerge. Understand this: she's not trying to destroy you. She's trying to find you, the real you, the one who doesn't shift with every mood, the one who can hold the line. That is strength, and it's what she's testing for, always. Explaining yourself too much is a form of submission. It's a subtle declaration that you seek approval, that you're afraid of being misunderstood, or worse, rejected. Nietzsche understood that those who possess true power rarely feel the need to justify it. Their actions speak. Their silence echoes. Their presence carries the weight of unspoken certainty. And when a man explains himself too much, he trades that certainty for validation. In relationships, over-explaining is often disguised as transparency. "I just want her to understand me," he says. But what he's really asking is, will you still accept me if I reveal this? And that question reveals dependency. Emotional dependency. A man who knows his value doesn't beg to be understood. He allows others to interpret him, but never chases their clarity. Because he knows, interpretation is a mirror, not a verdict. When you explain yourself too much, especially to a woman, you shift the dynamic. Instead of being perceived as a grounded, autonomous being, you become a reactive, insecure figure. Someone who fears her perception more than he trusts his own. This imbalance is deeply unattractive, not because you're wrong, but because it shows you're uncertain of your own stance. Women don't lose respect because you make mistakes. They lose respect when you can't own those mistakes with stoic conviction. Explaining is not owning, it's negotiating. It's an attempt to rewrite the story in her mind. But once you've lowered yourself to prove your intentions, you've told her, without saying a word, that your worth is up for discussion. Nietzsche believed that great individuals must learn to live with being misunderstood. That solitude is the price of clarity. You are not here to be decoded by everyone, and especially not by someone who tests you through emotional games. If she misreads your intentions and you immediately launch into detailed justifications, you've already conceded the high ground. You've made her understanding your emotional anchor. Powerful men are mysterious, not because they're hiding something, but because they don't overexpose themselves. They know that leaving things unsaid builds respect and curiosity. A woman is drawn to the man who leaves her slightly uncertain, who says less than he knows, and who speaks with deliberate restraint. Why? Because restraint signals control. And control is rare. This doesn't mean you should be evasive or dishonest. It means you must be intentional. Speak when your words carry weight, not when you're afraid of losing favor. If something must be said, say it clearly, once. Then hold your silence. Let her process it without scrambling to manage her reaction. If she respects you, she will reflect. If she doesn't, no amount of explaining will save you. Every time you explain yourself excessively, you hand her the frame. You give her the power to define you. Stop trying to be fully understood. Instead, become someone whose presence is understood without a word. That is how power moves. Quietly, confidently, and always without begging for clarity. Mystery is gravity. It pulls attention without asking for it. It makes people lean in, wonder, question, and, most dangerously, imagine. And once someone starts imagining who you are, they're no longer analyzing you logically. They're projecting fantasies, fears, hopes, whatever they want to believe. Nietzsche understood the seductive nature of the unknown. He said, to understand is to diminish. In other words, the clearer you become, the less powerful you appear. This is not a rejection of truth. It's an understanding of psychological leverage. People aren't drawn to those who hand them a blueprint of their soul. They're drawn to those who guard the door, speak with precision, and reveal just enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to kill it. In relationships, especially romantic ones, this principle is even more potent. The moment you lay yourself completely bare, you stop being a discovery and start being a solved puzzle. Clarity is comfort, but comfort isn't seductive. Women don't fall in love with what's fully explained. They fall in love with what stirs something, what challenges their expectations, what remains slightly out of reach. Mystery creates that emotional chase. It activates the subconscious, the instinct to figure out, to earn, to unlock you. When you give everything too early, your thoughts, emotions, past, opinions, daily routines, you strip the relationship of tension. And without tension, desire dies. Look at storytelling. The most compelling characters in any novel or film are not the ones who explain themselves every 5 minutes. They're the ones who suggest depth, who imply pain but don't wallow in it, who allude to a past but refuse to be defined by it. The audience leans in, hungry to know more, not because the character tells them, but because he doesn't. Now apply that to your life. When you show restraint in conversation, when you don't fill every silence with chatter, when you answer questions with calm ambiguity, you spark intrigue. She starts to think, what's he not saying? Why does he seem so unbothered? What does he actually want from me? And that mental loop becomes addictive, because now she's investing emotionally, psychologically, and she doesn't even realize it. Mystery also protects your power. When you don't overexpose your motivations or vulnerabilities, you deny others the tools to manipulate you. Clarity in the wrong hands becomes a weapon, but mystery keeps you untouchable, and in Nietzschean terms, that detachment is a form of elevation, a way to stay above petty emotion and maintain your inner sovereignty. This isn't about playing games, it's about presence. Intent, limiting access to your inner world until someone proves they can honor it. Because not everyone should get to know you. Most only want to understand you enough to feel in control. Don't let them. Leave gaps. Let silence speak. Let your life be more art than argument. Mystery seduces because it gives her something rare, the unknown. Clarity bores because it gives her something too common, certainty. And certainty, once fully possessed, is forgotten. So speak less, reveal slowly, and never forget, once the mystery dies, so does the spark. Desire is a double-edged sword. The more you want something, the more power it holds over you. And the more you show that want, the easier you are to control. Nietzsche knew this well. He saw that modern man, driven by craving and validation, was not free, but enslaved. Enslaved to comfort, to acceptance, to the illusion of love. If you want less, not only do you suffer less, but you influence more. Because nothing rattles people more than someone who does not need them. In relationships, this principle is gold. The man who needs her approval, her affection, her presence, becomes her subordinate. Even if she doesn't realize it consciously, the balance has shifted. He is now playing her emotional rhythm. He becomes reactive, not because he lacks strength, but because his desire outspeaks his boundaries. Every time he waits for her reply with tension, every time he adjusts his behavior to please her mood, he is reinforcing the power she holds over him. But if you want less, if you can walk away, delay gratification, or deny the urge to chase, you regain your center. You move from the emotional to the strategic. And that's where control lives. The man who can say no calmly is always more powerful than the man who says yes with desperation. This doesn't mean you must be detached from everything. It means you choose your desires carefully. That you guard your emotional investments like a strategist, not a gambler. Nietzsche warned against being possessed by your own longing. Once your longing becomes your identity, you no longer have it. It has you. And when a woman sees that her attention, her beauty, or her affection can send you spinning, she no longer sees a man, she sees a boy craving reward. The irony is, the moment you no longer need her, she often becomes more interested. Not because you're withholding affection, but because your independence radiates self-respect. You no longer orbit her attention, you become the gravitational force. And that flips the dynamic. Now she must earn your time. Now she wonders, why doesn't he chase me like others do? What does he see that I don't? That curiosity grows, and with it, her emotional investment. Power flows to those who want least, in negotiation, in seduction, in social dynamics. Because the one who can walk away holds the leverage. The one who doesn't need the deal can shape its terms. The same applies to love. A man who builds a life so rich, so full, so purposeful that no one woman can define it. That man is magnetic. Not because he plays games, but because he plays life at a higher level. So train yourself to want less. Not because you fear intimacy, but because you honor your self-respect more than your impulse. Restraint is not weakness. It's power under control. Want less, and you will never be emotionally owned again. In the world of Nietzsche, that's not just strength, it's freedom. Chasing what flees is the fastest way to lose your power. When something or someone moves away from you, your instinct may scream, go after it, prove your worth, win it back. But Nietzsche would tell you, that instinct is a trap. It's not born from strength, it's born from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of insignificance. And acting from fear is never noble. It's servitude in disguise. A woman who pulls away is not always testing you. Sometimes she's done. Sometimes she's uncertain. Sometimes she's using absence as leverage. But regardless of the reason, the moment you chase, you tell her, "I will abandon my dignity if it means keeping you." That confession might not be spoken out loud, but it's always felt. And once felt, it cannot be unseen. Do not chase what flees. Instead, pause, assess, and act with strategic detachment. If she leaves your life and leaves you empty, don't try to refill that space with pursuit. Replace it with purpose, with challenge, with a better connection, or a better version of yourself. Nietzsche believed in becoming, in the transformation of the self through will and rejection of weakness. Let her absence become fuel, not hunger. If she doesn't value your presence, elevate yourself beyond her recognition. Grow sharper. Become more precise in your speech, more disciplined in your action, more magnetic in your direction. When she realizes she lost someone who evolved rather than begged, the story shifts. You become the one that slipped away, not the one who crawled back. And sometimes the most powerful option is simply this: forget. Erase her hold on your identity. Cut the cord not just emotionally, but mentally. Because holding on in your mind is still a form of chasing. You're still writing the story in which she defines the chapter. Nietzsche warned against letting others become gods in your inner world. Forgetting is not ignorance, it's liberation. It's the conscious decision to move forward without dragging the corpse of what once was. This isn't about ego, it's about position. The man who chases becomes reactive. The one who replaces becomes focused. The one who elevates becomes formidable. And the one who forgets becomes untouchable. Women don't crave a man who loses himself over them. They crave a man who stays himself in spite of them. Not because he's cold, but because he's sovereign. In the economy of human connection, desperation is always overpriced. Chasing what flees devalues both the chaser and the prize. You teach people how to treat you by how you respond when they pull away. Let them go. Let them doubt. Let them wonder. And while they watch for your return, vanish into your becoming. Do not chase, replace, elevate, or forget. That is not cruelty. That is Nietzschean self-respect in motion. Affection can feel like love, but sometimes it's just a leash. Not every gentle touch or kind word is given freely. Sometimes it's strategic. Nietzsche warned us not to mistake sentiment for sincerity. Just because someone smiles doesn't mean they wish you well. In fact, the most dangerous forms of manipulation often come wrapped in warmth, not threats. Affection is powerful. It disarms your judgment. It lulls your guard into sleep, and that's exactly why it can be weaponized. When someone gives affection selectively, when their kindness follows your obedience or their attention disappears when you assert yourself, they're not showing love. They're showing leverage. In these moments, affection becomes a currency, given for compliance, withdrawn for independence. Think about it. When a woman showers you with praise every time you agree, but goes cold when you challenge her, what is she really training you to do? She's teaching you to conform, not out of logic, but out of emotional hunger. She rewards you with affection, not because she respects your truth, but because she wants you tamed. And many men fall into this trap because it doesn't look like control. It looks like care. Nietzsche saw through this. He believed that control often hides behind virtue, that those who seek to dominate others rarely appear as tyrants, They appear as saviors, lovers, or protectors. It's easy to resist cruelty. It's harder to resist affection, especially when you're starving for it. But that's what makes it so effective. When a man hasn't mastered his own need for validation, a single word of praise can bend his spine. The solution isn't to reject affection altogether, it's to study it. To ask, why is this being given? What happens when I stop playing along? True affection doesn't fear your growth. It doesn't demand conformity. It doesn't disappear the moment you disagree. If her warmth turns cold the moment you assert yourself, then you weren't being loved. You were being conditioned. Powerful men observe. They don't just feel affection. They analyze its timing, its patterns, and its consequences. They recognize when praise is genuine and when it's transactional. And they never adjust their values to secure affection. In fact, the more self-respect you develop, the less appealing conditional affection becomes. Because once you've tasted freedom, flattery feels cheap. You must also examine how you use affection. Are you giving it to influence, to manipulate, to secure attention, or approval in return? Control isn't always malicious, but it's always present when needs go unexamined. Nietzsche's call was not to become heartless, but to become sovereign. And sovereignty means loving without attaching strings and seeing clearly when strings are being attached to you. So the next time someone showers you with praise, asks for your time, or offers love when it benefits them, ask yourself, is this affection or is this control in disguise? Because in a world of emotional currency, the most dangerous chains are the ones that feel good. Telling her the truth is not the same as holding your frame. Many men believe that brutal honesty earns respect, that if they just explain their values, emotions, or intentions clearly, a woman will naturally respect them. But what she truly craves isn't the raw facts of your mind, it's the felt experience of your presence, your certainty, your leadership, your ability to guide the energy without suppressing hers. She doesn't want your truth as much as she wants to feel your dominance without cruelty. Dominance in this context is not about control. It's not barking orders or asserting yourself through force. It's about directional energy. It's the way you make decisions without needing her permission. The way you stay grounded when she spirals emotionally. The way you move with conviction while leaving room for her storm to rage. And settle. This kind of dominance doesn't belittle, it contains. It creates a structure where her feminine chaos can dance without collapsing the foundation. Cruelty, on the other hand, is dominance's toxic cousin. It comes from insecurity. The need to dominate to feel powerful instead of because you already are. It shows up as emotional distance, manipulation, or condescension. And while some women may temporarily submit to cruelty, they never respect it. It breeds resentment, not devotion. A woman's deepest craving isn't just for safety. It's for polarity, the magnetic tension between her emotional world and your grounded strength. That's what draws her in. Not because she wants to be ruled, but because she wants to relax in the presence of someone who can handle her. Someone who doesn't flinch when she tests. Someone who doesn't collapse when she withdraws. Someone who doesn't explain himself endlessly, but who radiates non-reactive authority. This is why your truth, as noble as it may be, often falls flat without presence. You might tell her, "This is who I am." But if you say it with nervous energy, with a rising voice, or with the need for her to understand, she doesn't hear your truth. She hears your weakness. She doesn't care about the logic behind your boundaries. She cares whether you can enforce them without asking for applause. Nietzsche would argue that man must go beyond mere honesty. He must embody the will to power, not through domination of others, but through mastery of self. The woman in front of you does not need a confession. She needs to feel that you are the container. that you will not crumble beneath her emotional waves, that you can lead without silencing, that you can hear her rage without absorbing it, that your no doesn't come with an essay, and your yes isn't given out of fear. The men who win long-term respect understand this. Dominance without cruelty is rare. It's the sacred middle path between passivity and tyranny. It's the man who says little, but whose presence says everything. And when she meets that man, she doesn't ask for his truth. She follows it. Because it's not spoken. It's felt. Outgrowing her isn't about bitterness. It's about evolution. The most dangerous man isn't the one who waits to be chosen. He's the one who never stops becoming. In a world where attention is currency and emotional attachment can become a prison, the highest leverage is growth. If she senses that you're stagnant, orbiting her approval, she starts to pull away, not always physically, but emotionally. Why? Because the feminine is drawn to movement, progress, power in motion. When you stop evolving, you stop being magnetic. Most men fear being replaced. They fear the day she finds someone funnier, richer, more mysterious. So they cling, they perform, they mold themselves to her moods. But this only accelerates the replacement. The more you try to hold on, the more she wonders why she should stay. Nietzsche understood that power is not about possession, it's about transcendence. You don't win by keeping her, you win by becoming someone she can't replace. And to do that, you must be willing to leave her behind internally, even if she's still beside you physically. You must become so focused on your craft, your body, your mission, your mind, that her presence no longer determines your direction. This doesn't mean you abandon love or commitment. It means that no part of you becomes dependent on her staying. You don't wait for her to change. You change first. You upgrade. You outgrow. Outgrowing her doesn't require cruelty. In fact, it requires deep self-respect. You become sharper in your thinking, more refined in your speech, more strategic in your habits, and you do it regardless of whether she notices, praises, or supports you. You're not performing for her, you're rising because it's what you were born to do. And she will feel that shift. She will feel the moment your world stops revolving around her. It's at that point that the dynamic flips. Suddenly, she's the one wondering, can I keep up? Am I enough for this new version of him? And if she can't, she may try to reassert control, not with open hostility, but with emotional pullbacks, subtle doubts, or nostalgic manipulation. That's her subconscious saying, slow down, stay where I can reach you. But if you slow down, you betray yourself. You become replaceable again. Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, the man who transcends his circumstances, applies here. Be the man who becomes too much for his past, too driven, too disciplined, too focused to be captured by comfort or emotional dependency. And if she can rise with you, she will. If not, you'll have outgrown her without a single argument. Growth is the silent revenge. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't scream, beg, or post updates. It simply happens. And one day she looks back at the man she once knew and realizes he no longer exists. So don't fear being replaced. Fear standing still. Outgrow her, not to win her back, but to make sure you never need her to feel complete. That's not just power. That's liberation. Pity feels like warmth, but it burns slowly. It disguises itself as care, as empathy, as kindness. But beneath its surface, pity is hierarchy. It is someone placing themselves above you while pretending to lift you up. And if you're not careful, you'll start to crave it. You'll begin to define your worth by how gently others treat you. That's when the trap tightens. Because pity does not empower, it contains. It offers comfort at the cost of respect. Nietzsche detested pity. He saw it as corrosive to strength, to vitality, to the upward motion of life. To be pitied is to be seen as incapable of rising on your own. And the moment you accept pity, you silently agree with that assessment. You begin to view yourself as the wounded bird rather than the phoenix. You stop growing. You start waiting for understanding, for support, for permission to heal. But growth does not wait. It demands you reject weakness as identity. In relationships, pity becomes especially dangerous. When a woman pities you, she may stay, but not out of desire, not out of respect. She stays because you've become a project, not a partner. She offers comfort, soft words, emotional bandages, but her attraction begins to rot because pity and passion do not coexist. You cannot be both her responsibility and her fantasy. The more she pities you, the less she feels compelled by you. And yet many men fall into this trap willingly. They lead with their wounds, they weaponize their trauma, they share every insecurity, every scar, hoping for validation, hoping that if she sees the depth of their pain, she'll stay. But she's not built to stay for pity. She's built to stay for presence. For a man who's been through hell and carries fire, not smoke. A man who doesn't beg to be seen, but commands attention by the way he stands, speaks, and moves forward. True compassion is different. True compassion empowers. It challenges you to rise. It doesn't trap you in your suffering. It holds a mirror to your potential. And that's the kind of compassion Nietzsche admired. The kind that demands growth, not comfort. The kind that walks beside you, not above you. If you find yourself surrounded by people who constantly comfort your weakness, ask yourself, what part of me is benefiting from this? Because there is always a payoff. Maybe it's attention, maybe it's safety, maybe it's avoiding the discomfort of change. But whatever it is, it's costing you your edge. And your edge is what makes you compelling, not your softness. So reject pity, not because you don't hurt, but because you refuse to be defined by it. Learn to receive compassion without becoming dependent on it. Learn to be witnessed without needing to be rescued. Stand in your pain without making it your personality. Because in Nietzsche's world, you are not meant to be cradled. You are meant to rise. And rising means burning pity to the ground. Apologies are not always a sign of integrity. Often, they're a performance. A ritual of self-minimization done more to relieve tension than to restore truth. Nietzsche understood that in a world obsessed with appearances, apologies can become currency, the price men pay for acceptance. But when you operate from true power, you no longer need to trade in that currency. Because real power doesn't seek approval, it projects direction. And when you're the one shaping the path, you're not asking for permission to walk it. There's a difference between accountability and apology. Accountability is strength. It's owning your actions with clarity. But the moment that ownership turns into pleading for forgiveness, especially in situations where your intent was firm and your action justified, you surrender your frame. You concede emotional ground. You teach the other person that your stability depends on their emotional response. That's not maturity. That's quiet desperation. In relationships, this becomes even more critical. Women don't lose respect because you made a mistake. They lose respect when you over-apologize, when you grovel, when you try to soothe them by shrinking yourself. That kind of apology is not noble. It's submission. And no amount of "I'm sorry" can fix the damage caused by abandoning your self-command. A man of power speaks less when under emotional fire. He doesn't explain away every tension. He doesn't collapse at the first sign of conflict. He holds the silence, lets the emotional dust settle, and acts with intention, not guilt. That restraint, that refusal to rush into apology just to smooth things over, commands far more respect than reactive regret ever will. Nietzsche would say that to apologize constantly is to deny the will to power, the inner force that refuses to be caged by social approval. When you are strong in your values, your vision, and your purpose, you don't fear being misunderstood. You accept it as part of the burden of leadership. Not everyone will like your choices. Not everyone will clap for your stance. But you don't bend just to avoid discomfort. This doesn't mean arrogance. It means discernment. When you do apologize, it carries weight. It's not automatic. It's not performative. It's rare and therefore meaningful, because people know you don't hand it out lightly. Your apology signals reflection, not insecurity. Powerful men apologize less because they live with alignment. Their words match their actions. Their intent is clear. And when conflict arises, they don't fold. They observe. They correct course if needed, but never through guilt, only through willful adjustment. That is power, and power doesn't need to kneel to be forgiven. It needs only to continue. So if you find yourself constantly apologizing, pause. Ask yourself, am I actually wrong or just uncomfortable with their reaction? And if it's the latter, stop apologizing. Own your space, own your voice, and move forward without waiting to be absolved. Because when you operate from true power, your life becomes your apology, and your results speak louder than any words ever could. A man without a mission is a man waiting to be distracted, and when distraction comes, it often arrives in the form of her. Her moods, her games, her attention, her silence, all become the centerpiece of his emotional world, not because she is the problem, but because he has nothing larger anchoring him. Nietzsche warned that when man lacks a higher calling, he collapses inward. He becomes reactive, emotionally erratic, and dangerously dependent on whoever gives his days meaning. In the absence of purpose, a woman becomes the mission, but women aren't designed to carry that burden. When a man orbits her, texting constantly, tracking her approval, adjusting his behavior based on her every shift, he might believe he's being loving, present, or emotionally available. But what she feels is weight. She feels his lack of direction, his identity tied not to progress, but to her. And while she may indulge it temporarily, it will eventually exhaust her. Women are drawn to the man who is going somewhere, who is building, creating, conquering, whether anyone watches or not. A man of direction, because his mission gives him emotional structure. He doesn't get pulled into petty arguments. He doesn't spiral if she withdraws. He doesn't overanalyze a single text. He has momentum, and that momentum is magnetic. But when a man lacks that, he becomes entertainment, a placeholder in her day, a convenient source of attention. And worst of all, he becomes dependent on how she feels about him to feel good about himself. Every glance, every compliment, every touch becomes his fuel. But no woman wants to be the sole source of a man's emotional energy. It places her in the role of caretaker, not companion, of mother, not muse. Nietzsche believed man's strength came from the pursuit of something beyond comfort, the pursuit of greatness, meaning, mastery. That mission is not optional. It's essential. It's what transforms a man from passive observer to active creator. And when you're in creation mode, when your day is full of deliberate action, training, learning, building, something shifts in how she looks at you. You no longer chase her validation. You no longer shrink in her storms. You become the calm. The mountain, not easily moved. This doesn't mean you neglect her. It means you lead. You bring her into a world that's already in motion. You share the ride, not the steering wheel. And ironically, the more you focus on your mission, the more she feels safe to be feminine, emotional, playful, unpredictable, because she knows your direction won't falter. So, if she's toying with your mind, draining your energy, or constantly pulling you into meaningless emotional drama, ask yourself, what am I building? What have I given up chasing to win her attention? Because if the answer is nothing, you've already lost her respect. A man without a mission becomes her entertainment. A man with one becomes her obsession. Choose which one you want to be. Then move before she finds someone who already is. When she's certain she has you, she stops trying to keep you. Predictability is comfort, but it's also decay. The moment she feels you're emotionally planted at her feet, waiting, hoping, orbiting, she stops looking up to you and starts looking past you. But if you carry yourself with a subtle distance, an unspoken ambition, a sense that your growth may already be outpacing her importance, she begins to wonder. Not because you're playing games, but because your evolution speaks louder than your affection. Nietzsche taught that human relationships are always shifting power dynamics. The man who becomes too available, too open, too eager to please, signals one thing: I'm not going anywhere. And that message kills intrigue. Women are not drawn to men who settle under their gaze. They are drawn to men who walk ahead, men who lead, transform, rise. The tension of "where is he going?" is far more intoxicating than any declaration of love. So how do you make her wonder if you've already outgrown her? Not through words, through energy, through movement, through silence that doesn't beg for attention but carries a quiet power. You show it by choosing the gym over a text reply, by improving your skill set while she posts for dopamine, by leaving her message on read while you study something she wouldn't expect you to master. You shift your center of gravity away from her approval and back into your own momentum. And when you do that, she feels it. She starts to question, what's changed? Is he bored? Is he becoming something I can't quite grasp anymore? And that questioning creates pull. It renews the chase. It resets the dynamic. Because now she's reminded that you are not stagnant, that your attention isn't guaranteed, that your love is a privilege, not a given. But this is not about manipulation. It's about refusing to rot in place. Too many men plateau in relationships. They stop training, stop learning, stop becoming. They think love is a finish line, not fuel. And when you stop evolving, you invite her to seek that thrill elsewhere, not always physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when that happens, it's already too late. Outgrowing her doesn't mean discarding her. It means continuing to rise, even if she hasn't asked you to. It means maintaining standards even when no one is watching. It means building yourself into a man whose presence is earned daily, not assumed. And if she rises with you, so be it. If she can't, the gap will reveal itself on its own. Let her feel the tension. Let her feel that quiet possibility that you may have already stepped into a world just slightly beyond her reach. That maybe, just maybe, she's the one who needs to grow to keep up. That's when respect returns. That's when the dynamic resets. So never stop becoming. Make her wonder, not because you're cruel, but because you're unreachable without growth. That's not distance. That's leadership. Confidence is not about volume. It's not in how much you talk, how often you brag, or how aggressively you enter a room. That's insecurity wearing a mask. True confidence, the kind that stops people mid-thought, is silent, not passive, but unbothered. It doesn't need to prove, to correct, or to dominate. It simply is. And everyone feels it. Unbothered men are dangerous because they don't flinch. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't need to be liked, praised, or reassured. And that absence of need is unsettling to people who rely on emotional leverage. Especially in relationships, this energy flips the script. A woman can't manipulate a man who doesn't react. She can't control the one who remains centered when tested. And that's exactly what pulls her in deeper. You see, the average man confuses ego with strength. He thinks raising his voice, interrupting, or posturing signals power. But Nietzsche would call that weakness dressed as noise. Real power is internal. It's built on discipline, solitude, competence, and the unwavering decision to not chase approval. When that's in place, your silence becomes louder than someone else's yelling. Your calm becomes more commanding than their chaos. Women test men to feel their foundation, not to destroy it, but to measure it. And when you react emotionally, get defensive, explain yourself excessively, or try to fix her mood, you communicate that your center is negotiable, that she can tilt you. But when you remain unbothered, cool, measured, present, you show her something rare. A man who governs himself. A man who doesn't let external storms shift his internal weather. This doesn't mean being cold, it means being in control. You feel emotion, but you don't become it. You hear her words, but you respond with intention, not impulse. You remain rooted even when the conversation sways. And that steadiness earns more respect than any grand romantic gesture or clever comeback ever could. Unbothered confidence also repels manipulation. When someone tries to bait you through criticism, silence, or guilt, and you don't bite, you break the pattern. You show them that your value isn't up for debate, that their disapproval changes nothing about how you carry yourself, that you own your time, your attention, your presence, and people begin to treat you accordingly. In Nietzsche's world, the powerful man is not the one who shouts the loudest. He's the one who has tamed the need to shout at all. He walks through life without explaining his worth. He commands not through force, but through gravity. He doesn't need a crown, because his eyes, his stillness, his discipline are the crown. So refine your calm, strengthen your silence. Let others panic, perform, and over-explain. Your confidence doesn't live in how you speak. It lives in what you can walk away from without blinking. Confidence is not loud, it's unbothered. And once you master that, no one can touch you. Promises are words. Edges are presence. A promise can be whispered by anyone, repeated endlessly, even believed. But an edge, you feel it. It lives in how a man carries himself, how he speaks without asking, how he moves with purpose even when no one's watching. Women may say they want security, and on the surface, they do, but what ignites desire, what holds attention and makes them restless in your absence, is not the promise of stability. It's the edge of a man who cannot be domesticated. Nietzsche understood this hunger for vitality, for the wild current beneath the civilized mask. A man's edge is not about danger for its own sake. It's about the refusal to be tamed, the refusal to become emotionally neutered just to keep the peace. Many men, once they enter a relationship, begin to smooth themselves out. They apologize more. They adjust. They shrink their ambition so they can be more present. They trade their edge for comfort, their fire for predictability. And slowly, without noticing, they become safe, but not desired. A woman might say she loves your kindness, and maybe she does. But what keeps her wanting you, what keeps her studying your silences and watching the door when you enter, is your edge, the part of you that won't fully yield, the part of you that still makes her earn access to your mind, your time, your loyalty. That edge signals to her primal brain, this man is his own. He is not emotionally available to the world. He is selective. And that selectiveness becomes intoxicating. Your promises might get you in the door, but your edge keeps her at the threshold, curious, attentive, and uncertain in the best possible way. Promises comfort the mind. Edge stirs the soul. When you promise to always be there, always be soft, always be understanding, you create a fantasy. But when reality hits, and it always does, only your presence, your strength, and your direction can hold the relationship together. Edge isn't cruelty. It's the willingness to say no and mean it. It's choosing your path over her preference when the two conflict. It's the discipline to walk away from drama instead of trying to fix it with affection. It's showing her, not telling her, that you won't abandon your mission just to soothe her feelings. When a woman sees that you will not compromise your core for love, she experiences something rare, trust mixed with tension. And it's that tension that keeps desire alive. The tension of, I have him, but I must not take him for granted. The tension of knowing you care, but that your care is not guaranteed. So stop trying to prove yourself with words. Promises are expected. Edge is earned. Edge is remembered. It doesn't need to be explained, and it doesn't beg to be accepted. It stands alone and invites her to rise to it. Because in the end, she doesn't crave your comfort. She craves the man behind it, the one with teeth behind the smile and fire beneath the stillness. Trying to be her everything is the fastest way to become nothing special. The modern man, fueled by romantic myths and cultural conditioning, is often taught that love means complete devotion, being her emotional support, best friend, therapist, entertainer, life coach, and safety net all in one. But Nietzsche would have seen this as a dilution of identity. When you stretch yourself to fill every role, you lose the sharpness of your essence. You become a blur. And desire doesn't chase the blur. It chases what stands apart. A woman doesn't want everything in one man. She wants one thing she can't get from anyone else. That might be your calm in chaos, your brutal honesty, your ability to lead without seeking validation, your clarity in a world of confusion. Whatever it is, it must be distinct. Because distinctness is what makes you irreplaceable. If everything you give her can be found in her friends, her phone, or her therapist, then you are no longer needed, just used, until someone newer, more convenient, or more exciting comes along. Trying to be everything is rooted in fear, the fear of losing her, the fear of not being enough. So you adapt, you overcompensate, you say yes when you want to say no. You listen for hours when you should be building something. You bend to her moods, shift your opinions, and slowly dissolve. And at first, she might reward that. She might say how caring and attentive you are. But deep down, her respect begins to die. Not because you're unkind, but because you're too accessible. Women don't stay for availability. They stay for impact, and impact requires contrast. If you're always there, always agreeable, always emotionally open, she stops looking at you as a force and starts seeing you as furniture, comfortable, familiar, easy to overlook. Nietzsche warned that identity must be forged, not negotiated. When you try to be everything, you hand her the chisel and ask her to shape you. But what she truly desires is a man who shapes himself and invites her to step into that world, not sculpt it. Be the one thing no one else can. The one man in her life who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't need her approval to speak his truth, who doesn't collapse into her when she's emotional but stands still like a pillar, not out of coldness, but out of centeredness. That kind of energy is rare, and rarity commands attention. Rarity commands devotion. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overreaching. You stop auditioning. You pick the part of you that's forged in fire, your clarity, your intensity, your direction, and you refine it until it becomes your signature. That's what she will remember. That's what she will measure other men against when you're not around. So don't aim to be her everything. Be the one thing she knows she'll never find twice. Because when you hold that position, you never chase love. You anchor it. Silence cuts deeper than shouting ever could. It doesn't just withhold words, it withholds access. When a man goes silent, especially one who's usually composed and intentional, that silence speaks volumes. It says, I've seen enough. It says, you no longer earn my energy. And most of all, it says, I am not here to be managed emotionally. That's why silence is often the most violent answer. It can't be argued with. It can't be debated. It lingers in the air, heavy, unresolved, and undeniable. Nietzsche understood that restraint isn't weakness, it's a form of dominance. In a world that over-communicates, silence is a signal of inner power. It means you don't need to explain yourself to be understood. You don't chase validation through clarification. You let others wrestle with their own confusion, discomfort, and misinterpretation. Because your value isn't on trial, and you aren't auditioning for understanding. When a woman tests you, throws emotional bait, criticizes you, or pulls back affection, most men react. They defend, they explain, they try to fix it. But the man who answers with silence sends a completely different message. I'm not here to dance with chaos. And that silence is felt. It's not passive. It's presence. It holds a mirror to her behavior without lifting a finger. There's a difference between passive silence and charged silence. The first is cowardice, avoidance, fear of confrontation. The second is intentional, a weaponized calm. It doesn't come from weakness. It comes from the clarity that words would only cheapen the moment. When used properly, it commands more respect than any counter-argument could, because it leaves space for reflection. And reflection is where real shifts happen. Women are deeply attuned to energy. She can feel when your silence is avoidance, and she can feel when your silence is power, when you stop responding, not out of emotional withdrawal, but out of self-respect. She starts to notice. She replays the last conversation in her head. She starts questioning her assumptions. And that tension, that psychological vacuum your silence creates, that's where influence lives. Nietzsche would argue that silence is the highest form of communication when words are no longer useful, especially in power dynamics. The one who can hold silence longest often holds the upper hand. Why? Because most people panic in silence. They fill the space with nervous laughter, apologies, explanations, revealing their need to be understood, to be liked, to be forgiven. The man who doesn't need that, who can sit in the discomfort without blinking, demonstrates sovereignty over himself and the situation. But silence also has to be earned. It's only powerful when you've already built a presence that means something. A man who's inconsistent or emotionally weak can't suddenly go silent and expect it to land. But a man who is calm, grounded, and typically deliberate, when he goes silent, it echoes. So next time words rise to your lips in the middle of conflict, pause. Ask yourself, will speaking add power or leak it? Because sometimes the strongest move is to say nothing and let your absence do the talking. The moment you begin explaining yourself, you begin unraveling your power. You take the mystery, the tension, the strength of your presence, and dilute it with words that beg to be understood. A man who constantly explains is a man seeking validation. A man who lets others interpret him, however, is a man who owns his energy and refuses to let it be defined by someone else's lens. Nietzsche would argue that power is not about convincing others. It's about being so deeply rooted in yourself that others are drawn to make sense of you. And that's the essence of influence. It's not telling people who you are. It's living in such a way that they feel compelled to figure it out. And even then, you don't confirm or deny. You simply exist, unwavering, unbothered, and unreadable. Letting her interpret you activates something primal in her psychology. The feminine is drawn to mystery, to the challenge of emotional decoding. If you give everything away, your thoughts, your intentions, your fears, she loses the thrill of pursuit. She may appreciate your honesty, but her desire will start to fade. Because desire is born from uncertainty, and uncertainty is sustained by interpretation, not explanation. When you don't explain yourself, you communicate several unspoken messages. First, you don't need her to agree with you. Second, her approval is not your currency. Third, your internal world is not available on demand. That kind of restraint demands respect. It challenges her, and that challenge becomes addictive. But here's the trap. Most men explain because they fear being misunderstood. They think if she gets them, she'll stay. If she understands the logic behind their words, the emotion behind their silence, the reasoning behind their decisions, she'll appreciate them more. But this only works in theory. In practice, it reveals insecurity. It shows that you don't trust your presence to speak for you, that your truth is fragile unless she validates it. Letting her interpret you means allowing her to sit in her own uncertainty. It means giving her space to wonder what you meant, why you didn't respond, what you're thinking. That space creates gravity, and gravity pulls. She'll lean in. She'll test again. She'll try to read your face, decode your pauses, understand your silences. And in doing so, she becomes invested, mentally and emotionally. Nietzsche didn't believe in making yourself easily digestible. He believed in being sovereign. That means being your own authority. And sovereign men don't explain. They decide. They move, speak, act, and let the world adjust. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. They know what they meant. They don't need to repackage their truth to be liked. So if she misreads you, let her. If she assumes something wrong, let her sit with it. If she questions your motives, don't race to defend yourself. Say less. Move with intention. And watch as your silence, your restraint, your refusal to over-explain becomes the very thing she can't stop thinking about. Because the man who lets her interpret him keeps his power. The man who explains it away loses it. Every time. Time is your most precious currency. Where it goes, your energy follows. And where your energy flows, your thoughts begin to orbit. That's why when a woman controls your time, your schedule, your availability, your routines, she doesn't just influence your day. She begins to govern your mind. Nietzsche believed in the supremacy of the self, of one's ability to govern his own life. When you surrender control of your time, you surrender that sovereignty. It often starts subtly. You rearrange a plan to meet her. You stay on a call longer than you intended. You pause your gym session to respond to her emotions. At first, it feels like flexibility. You call it love, support, compromise. But over time, your agenda disappears. Your day begins revolving around her needs, her desires, her rhythm. And what feels like connection quickly becomes erosion of your structure, your mission, your edge. A man without control over his time is a man in emotional debt. He begins to anticipate her reactions. He worries about how long he took to reply. He checks in constantly, not because he's grounded, but because he's occupied. She becomes the centerpiece of his mental space, and when she's upset, distant, or disapproving, his entire world becomes unstable. Not because she's manipulative, but because he gave away the steering wheel. Women don't respect men who are always available. They respect men who are in motion, who are committed to something bigger than the relationship, something that cannot be paused just because she feels needy. When you guard your time, you're not rejecting her, you're asserting yourself. You're showing that your mind is guided by purpose, not emotion, that your hours are spoken for, that she is invited into your world, not the architect of it. When she controls your time, she decides how you live. She defines your pace, your mood, your focus, and worst of all, you start to feel guilty when you choose yourself. That guilt is the sign you've already been conditioned. You've learned that saying no disrupts the emotional balance, so you sacrifice in silence. You skip workouts. You delay your goals. You stay up late in conversations that drain you, thinking it will make her stay. But what it really does is drain your identity. Nietzsche would say, build your life so deliberately that others must fit into it, not reshape it. This doesn't mean you become cold or unyielding. It means you become principled with your time. If you say you're working until noon, work until noon. If you plan to train, train. If your routine is sacred, protect it. Because every time you bend without reason, you teach her that your boundaries are flexible, your goals negotiable, and your mission secondary. She may resist at first. She may call you distant or selfish. But if she respects you, she'll adjust. If she doesn't, she was never aligned with your vision to begin with. Control your time, or someone else will. And once they own your calendar, they begin to own you. Guard it, ruthlessly, because your mind, your power, depends on it. When things fall apart, most men default to the question, what went wrong? It's a question driven by confusion, pain, and a desperate need for clarity. But Nietzsche would urge a different angle, a harder one that doesn't seek blame in others, but reveals blind spots in your own boundaries. The more powerful question is, what did I allow? Because power isn't in diagnosing her behavior, it's in understanding your own thresholds. Where you tolerated disrespect, accepted inconsistency, forgave without correction, and stayed silent when you should have drawn a line. Asking what went wrong puts you in the seat of the victim. It suggests that the outcome was something done to you. But what did I allow turns the mirror inward. It transforms you from passive to active, from someone trying to make sense of chaos to someone who now builds fences against it. Every broken dynamic, whether romantic, social, or professional, thrives on permission. You don't get manipulated unless you allow someone to play with your emotions. You don't get disrespected twice unless you taught them that the first time had no consequence. You don't end up drained unless you kept showing up to the extraction. This isn't about blame, it's about ownership. Nietzsche taught that true strength lies in embracing the burden of freedom. And freedom means you chose it, even if unconsciously. You chose to ignore red flags. You chose to rationalize behavior. You chose comfort over confrontation, validation over solitude, connection over clarity. And now, the consequence isn't just emotional, it's spiritual depletion. But here's the power. When you shift your question from what went wrong to what did I allow, you access change. You stop needing closure from the other person. You no longer wait for their apology, their recognition, or their return. Because it doesn't matter. What matters is that you now see the mechanism. You see where your standards were unclear, where your voice was muted, where your identity softened in exchange for belonging. And once you see it, you can correct it. You can begin to raise your price, not in arrogance, but in clarity. You can build new rules, not to control others, but to govern yourself. You'll start recognizing patterns sooner. You'll stop explaining your standards and start enforcing them. And most importantly, you'll stop betraying your intuition just to keep the peace. Nietzsche didn't admire those who played the victim well. He respected those who turned suffering into strength, who alchemized heartbreak into boundaries, who used every betrayal as evidence of where they needed to rise. So stop asking why she changed, why she left, why she lost respect. Ask, where did I make that possible? Where did I train her to believe I wouldn't walk away? That's where the work begins. Because the only thing worse than being broken is staying breakable. And you stop being breakable the moment you stop asking what went wrong and start asking what you allowed to continue. You can't win an argument in the realm of emotion. Logic is useless where emotion rules, and Nietzsche understood this well. He saw that most people don't think their way to conclusions. They feel their way there, then use logic to justify it afterward. Nowhere is this more true than in relationships. When she's emotional, when her body is flooded with doubt, anger, insecurity, or fear, no amount of reason will bring her back. And if you try, you lose your position, not because you're wrong, but because you're speaking a language that doesn't register. Don't argue where she feels. That means you don't try to explain your intentions during a storm. You don't lecture her into peace. You don't debate her emotional reactions like a philosopher correcting a student. It may feel like you're clarifying things, but what she hears is defensiveness, justification, weakness. She's not asking for a TED Talk. She's looking for a signal of groundedness, certainty, and control. The key is to act where she doubts. If she doubts your direction, show her your vision through your actions. If she doubts your strength, remain calm when she's in chaos. If she doubts your independence, disappear into your mission, not to punish, but to re-anchor. Action is the antidote to emotional instability. It's what separates men who talk from men who move. A woman's emotional outbursts are often tests, conscious or unconscious. She wants to know if your foundation is real. Can you still lead when she's pushing every button? Can you hold your frame without needing to convince her? Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, the internal force that defines your essence. That will isn't expressed through argument. It's expressed through behavior, through silent self-governance. When you don't flinch, she notices. When you don't match her chaos with your own, she recalibrates. Acting where she doubts means speaking less and doing more. If she questions your ambition, she doesn't need a motivational speech. She needs to see you rising before dawn, building something she wasn't even invited to understand. If she accuses you of not caring, don't drown her in affection. Just lead again. Take control of the space, the rhythm, the decisions. Make her feel that you're in command, not because you said so, but because you are. This isn't about manipulation. It's about leadership. The same way a general doesn't explain every order to his troops, you don't explain every boundary or intention. You show it. You enforce it. You live it. And over time, she learns. Your actions are more consistent than her emotions. That makes her feel safe. That makes her feel held, not with words, but with structure. So when the next wave comes, when she's flooded with emotion and looking to draw you into the drama, don't argue. Don't justify. Don't plead to be understood. Stand tall, breathe, say less, and move with intent. She'll follow, not because you won the argument, but because you restore the order she was testing for. Most men make the mistake of trying to secure a woman's loyalty by proving how irreplaceable she is. They give constant validation, excessive attention, and unconditional emotional investment, thinking it will anchor her. But Nietzsche would argue that attachment grows not from certainty, but from tension, from the subtle awareness that something valuable could be lost. And in relationships, the man who signals that he could walk away at any moment, not out of cruelty but out of self-respect, is the one who commands devotion. When you make a woman feel like she's the prize and you're the chaser, she has no incentive to pursue. She knows she has you. She feels your emotional dependency. She senses that you're invested more than necessary, and that gives her a quiet, unspoken power. It's not always malicious. It's human nature. We value what's scarce. We question what isn't guaranteed. We chase what might slip through our fingers. That's why the moment she feels replaceable, her mind shifts. Suddenly, you're the prize. This doesn't mean being disrespectful or dismissive. It means living in a way that radiates options. Emotional options, social options, sexual options. She needs to know, without you having to say it, that other women notice you, that you choose her, but you don't need her, that your world doesn't collapse if she leaves it, and that your standard for behavior doesn't bend just to keep her around. A man who makes a woman feel replaceable isn't insecure or manipulative. He's just aligned with reality. No one is irreplaceable, not her, not you. And by living from that truth, you remove the pedestal. You stop worshiping her attention. You stop performing for her approval. You stop apologizing for enforcing boundaries, and she feels that. She senses that you won't beg, won't chase, won't negotiate your worth. Ironically, that's what makes her want to earn it. When a woman knows that your attention is earned, not handed out like candy, she starts investing more. She dresses differently. She texts more often. She watches your reactions. She becomes curious. Why? Because she doesn't feel entitled to you anymore. And that shift, from certainty to curiosity, is where obsession begins. Nietzsche understood that power never clings. Power moves. It walks away without hesitation when respect is lost. And that very ability to walk without drama becomes its own gravitational force. When she realizes you can leave without flinching, she starts guarding her position. She becomes more careful with her words, more intentional with her time. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy demanded it. So stop reassuring her that you'll never leave. Stop trying to make her feel irreplaceable. Let her earn your loyalty. Let her feel the tension of your standards. Let her wonder if someone else could take her place. Because when she feels replaceable, she starts working to become indispensable. And when that happens, you flip the dynamic, not through manipulation, but through disciplined indifference. And that's how power holds. Quietly, relentlessly, without ever needing to raise its voice. Worship is the death of polarity. The moment you place a woman above yourself, on a pedestal, in your thoughts, in your emotional center, you cease to be a man she can respect. You become something else entirely, a servant disguised as a lover, a fan pretending to be a partner. And Nietzsche would warn, once you start worshiping, you no longer live with power. You live in submission, and submission breeds invisibility in the feminine psyche. Women are not attracted to the man who worships them. They are drawn to the man who is slightly out of reach, the man who sees their value, appreciates their beauty, but never lets it override his direction. Worship, by its nature, is one-sided. It elevates her to a divine level and reduces you to the role of emotional supplicant. And no matter how much she says she wants love, attention, or adoration, what she feels is the energy beneath it. And if that energy screams neediness, attachment, or unworthiness, she disconnects. When you worship her, you stop seeing clearly. You ignore red flags. You justify disrespect. You tolerate emotional chaos that you'd never allow from anyone else. Why? Because you've made her your son. And when someone becomes your son, you forget how to walk in the dark. You become dependent, reactive, and worst of all, predictable. And predictability is the slow death of attraction. Nietzsche saw love not as surrender, but as tension, as power meeting power. As two sovereign beings walking alongside each other, not one kneeling in awe of the other. Worship creates imbalance. It eliminates polarity. It removes the very tension that makes her feel feminine in your presence. A woman wants to feel the current of your strength, not the weight of your devotion. She wants to know you can appreciate her without losing yourself in her. When you worship her, she starts to forget you, not because you're invisible, but because you've become safe, too available, too emotionally entangled. You become the man she knows she can call, cancel on, manipulate, and return to whenever she's bored. Not because she's cruel, but because you trained her to expect that you'll always be there, always be loyal, always be small in the presence of her. Instead, be the man who admires her without worshiping, who respects her but never sacrifices his identity, who can walk away if his values are violated, who doesn't fear her absence because his life is already full. That man doesn't get forgotten. He's etched in her mind, not because of how much he gave, but because of how little of himself he was willing to give away. Worship is not love. It's self-erasure. Stop trying to prove her worth with your attention. Start proving your worth by standing tall in your mission. Be the man she's drawn to, not the one who fades into her shadow the moment she glows. Because once you worship her, she doesn't feel honored. She feels alone at the top. And that's when she forgets you. Pain might win you sympathy, but it will never earn you respect. Especially not from a woman who subconsciously craves strength, direction, and forward motion. Many men fall into the trap of thinking that if they open up about their suffering, their heartbreak, their emotional scars, she will stay. That she will be moved, that she will love them more deeply for it. But Nietzsche would argue otherwise. He knew that it is not suffering that makes a man noble, but what he does with it. Your suffering doesn't move her, it weighs on her, not because she's heartless, but because the feminine is not built to carry a man's brokenness long term. She may comfort you in a moment. She may express empathy, even cry with you. But over time, if your pain becomes your identity, if your wounds become your constant narrative, she begins to pull away, not with cruelty, but with a growing sense that she cannot rest in you. Because how can she relax into your arms if you're still trying to stand up? What does move her? Your evolution. The way you turn loss into discipline. The way you rise from betrayal with sharper boundaries. The way you alchemize pain into presence, stronger, quieter, more focused than before. When she sees that, she doesn't pity you, she admires you. Because now you are a force. You are not asking to be held, you are the one who holds. A man who evolves becomes a symbol. He reminds her of what is possible. He shows her that life doesn't end with heartbreak. It begins with transformation. He becomes more attractive, not despite his scars, but because he refused to let them define him. That's the man who draws attention. That's the man she brags about. Not the one who cried over her texts, but the one who got quiet, disappeared, rebuilt, and came back undeniable. But to get there, you have to stop seeking emotional rewards for your suffering. No woman will give you the closure you hope for. No one is coming to validate your pain the way you imagine. You must earn your own closure through action, through leveling up, through refusing to stay in a chapter that tried to bury you. Nietzsche didn't preach comfort. He preached becoming. And becoming always begins with suffering, but it never ends there. Do not perform your pain. Do not share it as currency. Share your journey, if you must, but only from a place of strength, not from a place of seeking. Let your transformation speak louder than your story. Let your silence after the storm echo with more power than any tearful monologue. Because when she sees you again, confident, composed, evolving, she won't remember the sadness in your eyes. She'll remember the discipline in your stride. And even if she doesn't return, she'll feel the man she once underestimated has become someone she'll never forget. That's the truth. Your suffering doesn't move her, but your evolution, that redefines you forever. Charm is a weapon, but like any weapon, if it isn't aimed with intention, it turns back on the one who wields it. Most men confuse charm with success. They believe that if they're likable, smooth, witty, or magnetic, they'll earn attention, affection, and power, and for a time, they might. But Nietzsche would argue that charisma without a mission is not a gift. It's a distraction, a way to stay admired without ever becoming dangerous. And in the long run, it's a form of self-sabotage. Charm is not hard to develop. Learn how to read a room, train your body language, master tone and timing. You can easily become someone who people gravitate toward. But the question is, then what? What's behind the smile? What direction are you pulling people into? If there's no depth behind your charm, no values, no drive, no standard. You become entertaining, not compelling. You get attention, not allegiance. This is where many men fall. They lean so hard into being liked that they forget to be respected. They become performers, not leaders. They tell women what they want to hear. They're fun at parties. They're easy to talk to. But when it comes time to decide, to lead, to set boundaries, they fall short. Because they've built themselves as reactors, not architects. And eventually, the very charm that once attracted becomes the reason they're dismissed. He's charming, but he has no spine. Purpose gives charm weight. It turns charm from a party trick into a tool. A man with purpose can use charm to disarm, to inspire, to connect, but he never uses it to escape responsibility or to avoid conflict. He doesn't use it to manipulate others into liking him. He uses it to magnify what he already is. That's the key. Charm should serve your path, not replace it. When a woman senses charm without backbone, she might enjoy your company, but she won't trust your leadership. She won't respect your silence. She won't follow your direction, because charm without purpose is unstable. It flows with the mood. It changes with the crowd. It pleases without conviction. It seeks approval rather than alignment. Nietzsche respected the individual who shaped life from the inside out, not the one who adapted to be adored. He believed that power came from self-creation, not public applause. So if your charm isn't serving a mission, it's eroding your core. You're spending your social capital on validation, not building something real. So refine your charm, yes, but anchor it to something immovable. A goal, a standard, a non-negotiable vision. Make sure your words are aligned with your values, your gestures with your direction. Let your presence say, I could charm you, but I don't need to. That's when charm becomes dangerous. That's when it becomes earned, not thrown around. Because charm without purpose will get you attention, but purpose with presence will make you unforgettable. One entertains, the other leads. Always choose the latter. Loneliness isn't the real enemy. Dependency is. Most men are terrified of solitude, not because it hurts, but because it forces them to confront the emptiness they've been masking with connection. Nietzsche understood that the crowd offers comfort, but comfort often dulls growth. The stronger fear is not in being alone, it's in being unable to stand alone. Because once you need someone to feel whole, you've handed them the blueprint to control you. When you need someone to complete you, your power vanishes. You become emotionally fragile, constantly gauging their moods, fearing their withdrawal, tailoring your identity to avoid abandonment. This is not love. It's quiet self-erasure. Your boundaries dissolve. Your ambitions shrink. You begin to orbit around them instead of walking your own path. And the worst part? They can feel it. People always sense when you need them to stay. That need becomes repellent, not attractive. True strength begins when you're able to sit with your own silence, to be in a room with no distractions, no validation, and still feel grounded, to know that your worth is not tethered to anyone else's attention or affection. A man who does not fear solitude cannot be manipulated. He cannot be baited with affection or controlled through absence. He walks into relationships already full, so he doesn't need to feed off the other person's energy to survive. This is not to say that relationships are weak. On the contrary, powerful relationships are built between two individuals who are already sovereign, who walk side by side, not leaning on each other for emotional survival. A woman doesn't want to complete you, she wants to join you, but she can't join a man who's still trying to find himself in her eyes. When you fear being alone, you make dangerous compromises. You tolerate what you shouldn't. You stay longer than you should. You soften your voice, suppress your needs, and trade your authenticity for temporary companionship. But every time you do that, you teach your subconscious that you are not enough on your own. That without her, or anyone, you collapse. Nietzsche spoke of becoming, a constant transformation through struggle, through solitude, through self-confrontation. That transformation happens in the absence of noise, when no one is clapping, when no one is texting, when it's just you, your thoughts, your pain, and your potential. And if you can master that environment, no relationship can ever undo you. The irony is this: the less you need someone, the more magnetic you become. The man who is whole, who moves with or without applause, becomes the anchor others seek. Women don't want a man who needs them to survive. They want a man who thrives and chooses them freely. That choice, made from fullness, is what creates respect. It's what turns attraction into admiration. So don't fear being alone. Fear the version of yourself that crumbles without external validation. Because when you stop needing anyone to feel whole, you become unshakable. And from that place, love becomes a choice, not a lifeline. Every man wears a mask. It's not deception, it's strategy. The mask is composure, confidence, control. It's the version of you she meets first, the one that draws her in. She loves the mask because it's polished, it's refined. It doesn't stutter, doesn't doubt, doesn't bleed. And for a while, that mask is all she wants to see. It gives her something to admire, to desire, to chase. But eventually, as she gets closer, she'll start to wonder, what's behind it? And that's when everything changes. The moment she senses that something darker, deeper, or more powerful lies beneath, the dynamic shifts. She'll start to test, to poke, to peel back layers, not always out of malice but out of instinct. She wants to know who she's dealing with. Not the performer, not the charmer, but the core. And when she starts to feel that there's something in you she can't quite define or control, her curiosity will turn into fear, because power that doesn't explain itself is terrifying. And if what's behind your mask is stronger than the mask itself, she'll feel it in her body before she understands it with her mind. Most men get scared at this stage. They rush to reassure her. They start revealing too much, too soon. They unpack their wounds in an attempt to be authentic. But this surrender often backfires because she didn't want vulnerability, she wanted structure. She wanted to know if what's behind the mask is something she can trust, not something she needs to fix. Nietzsche would argue that this tension is essential, the tension between appearance and essence. The mask is necessary because it holds the world at bay. It allows you to operate with discipline, to focus your energy, to protect the parts of you still becoming. But if the mask is all you are, if there's no substance behind it, she'll eventually leave, because a mask without depth is just decoration. And once she's seen it all, she'll lose interest. The key is to let her feel your depth without fully handing it over. Let her sense the storm, but not control it. Let her glimpse the chaos you've tamed, the ambition you don't flaunt, the pain you've forged into discipline. She will love the mask, but what keeps her close is what haunts behind it. The unspoken parts of you that suggest there's always more. That fear isn't bad. It's sacred. It means you haven't been conquered. It means there are still unexplored corners in you, still boundaries she cannot cross. And those boundaries create the polarity that fuels desire. Don't remove the mask for the sake of emotional closeness. Let her earn access. Let her feel the presence of something untouchable in you. Because when a woman feels that she doesn't fully own you, but she's been invited to stand near your fire, she stays sharp, she stays engaged, she stays drawn to the man who gave her a mask to admire and a mystery to respect. Nietzsche had no illusions about love. He saw through its metaphors, its soft language, and its romantic ideals. He didn't view love as the pure, selfless bond society likes to paint. It wasn't unconditional, and it certainly wasn't innocent. To him, love was a power dynamic, often dressed in poetic clothing. Beneath the declarations of forever, need, and devotion lies something sharper: possession. Not always violent, not always obvious, but always there. Love, at its core, seeks to possess the beloved, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and existentially. Every "I love you" carries an unspoken "you're mine," not in the crude, controlling sense, but in the deeply human desire to hold, to keep, to anchor what moves us. That's why people get jealous, why they obsess, why betrayal stings so deeply. It's not just about the broken bond. It's the loss of control, the unraveling of possession. You don't mourn just the person. You mourn the version of yourself that owned that connection. This doesn't mean love is false. It means it's raw. And Nietzsche preferred raw truth over comfortable lies. He saw that love is often less about giving and more about claiming. When someone falls in love, they don't just want to see you happy. They want to be the reason for it. They want to be necessary, indispensable, irreplaceable. That's not pure altruism. That's ego. That's identity. Poetry softens love's edges. It wraps possession in metaphors and music, in sunsets and sonnets. It says, "I want to be with you," but what it often means is, "I want you to want no one else." It speaks of eternal longing, but beneath that longing is the need to own your place in someone's life story. Nietzsche didn't reject this instinct, he just exposed it. And once exposed, love becomes something more powerful, conscious, no longer an accidental fall, but a deliberate engagement. When a man understands that love contains the will to possess, he stops pretending it's all light. He stops shaming himself for wanting exclusivity, for feeling territorial, for needing significance in her life. But more importantly, he also stops being naive. He understands that she, too, may love with claws, may demand access, time, obedience, or emotional exposure, not just out of affection, but out of possession. She may ask for vulnerability not to connect, but to own your depth. That's the danger and the seduction of love. It doesn't always present itself as control. It presents itself as poetry, as shared dreams, as soulful stares. And yet, beneath all that, it's a game of territory. Nietzsche's wisdom wasn't to avoid love, but to see it clearly, to accept that the desire to possess is human, but it must be managed, not romanticized. When you enter love without illusion, you stop being blindly pulled by it. You engage it with awareness. You see the poetry and the power. Because love, no matter how beautifully worded, is still a battlefield of identity. And only the man who sees both the mask and the mechanism can navigate it without losing himself. The moment she becomes the center of your life, you lose the axis that holds your world together. You orbit her moods, her opinions, her attention, and in doing so, you surrender your gravity. Nietzsche warned of this collapse of self, of men who dissolve into the identity of others, forfeiting their will to power in exchange for fleeting emotional safety. If she sees that you revolve around her, if she senses that her presence determines your peace, then she knows she doesn't follow your lead. You follow her presence. And with that realization, respect begins to die. A woman doesn't want to be your everything. She wants to feel that she's chosen by a man who is already complete, a man who is centered in himself, who is moved by vision, not validation. But when you make her your center, you send the opposite message. I am only stable if you stay. That's not love. That's quiet emotional dependency. You start saying yes when you mean no. You skip your training, your goals, your time alone. You trade your edge for closeness and call it intimacy. But it's not intimacy. It's erosion. It's the slow bleeding away of your discipline, your standards, your presence. You become reactive instead of intentional. You check your phone more, hoping she's thinking about you. You craft your words carefully, hoping not to disrupt the connection. You live for her, not with her. And at first, she may enjoy this power. She may enjoy being the sun in your sky. But deep down, she starts to feel it. The weight of your emotional dependence. The fact that you no longer lead your own life. That your passion, your purpose, your fire, all bend toward her approval. And she can't rest in that. She can't admire it. She may feel loved, but she won't feel led. And without leadership, the polarity fades. The attraction fades. Nietzsche truly believed the individual must create his own values, his own rhythm, his own code. That's your center, your mission, your standard. And everything, including her, must orbit that. Not because you don't care, but because you care about something even greater, the man you are becoming. That's the axis she can trust. That's the frame she wants to relax into. Not a man chasing her attention, but a man chasing his own standard, with or without her. When she sees that your peace, your power, your identity are rooted in something deeper than her presence, she feels relief. She no longer carries the pressure of being your everything. She gets to choose to be part of your life, not to define it. And ironically, that's when she starts investing more. Because you are no longer a mirror, reflecting her. You are a force, pulling her into your gravity. So never make her your center. Be the center. Let her orbit your flame, not extinguish it. Because if she sees herself as your sun, she'll eventually burn out your sky. And once that happens, there's nothing left for her to follow. Peace may seem like the goal, but in the world of polarity and attraction, peace can become the slow death of desire. Many men are trained to believe that the more comfortable, emotionally available, and safe they make a woman feel, the more she'll love them. But Nietzsche would challenge that belief. He understood that humans, especially in the context of love, are not moved by safety alone. They are moved by awe. And awe is born not in peace, but in tension, specifically the tension of admiration. When you give her constant reassurance, total transparency, emotional predictability, you may earn her appreciation, but not her fire. You become familiar, accessible, and eventually forgettable. She may feel close to you, but she no longer feels pulled. And that pull is essential. It's what makes her lean in, wonder, question, and pursue. It's the energetic distance that keeps her on her toes. Not unsure of your loyalty, but unsure if she's fully earned your full presence. The tension of admiration is different from chaos. You don't create drama. You create weight. You walk with purpose. You speak with precision. You hold your ground, not for dominance, but because you're rooted in something deeper than her approval. You live by your code, your vision, your standard. And when she sees that, when she sees that your life is moving with or without her, she starts to admire. And that admiration keeps the attraction alive. Peace is important, but not the peace of emotional dependency. Not the kind of peace that comes from neutering your intensity just to avoid arguments. If you trade your edge for comfort, you lose polarity. You become a friend, a caretaker, an emotional sponge. She won't hate you for it, but she won't crave you either. The tension of admiration lives in how you handle disagreement without apologizing for your truth. It lives in the mystery you maintain, not by hiding, but by refusing to over-explain. It lives in the discipline you show, the self-respect you enforce, and the sense that you could leave. Not because you don't care, but because you won't abandon yourself to stay. Women don't desire men who disappear into emotional softness. They desire men who remain solid under pressure, who invite them into a world of movement challenge, and excellence. A man who isn't afraid to say, "This is how I live. You're welcome to join, but I'm not stopping." That edge, that is what keeps her attention long after the novelty fades. Nietzsche knew that love isn't about being easy, it's about being necessary. Necessary because you are uncommon, because you are driven, selective, and unwavering. And when she realizes she can't fully hold you, but can only admire the fire you carry, that's when desire reaches its peak. So don't give her peace if it costs your power. Give her the kind of tension that inspires admiration. That keeps her guessing, not about your loyalty, but about how high you're going to rise next. That's the real spark. And once lit, it doesn't fade. It grows. Predictability is safe, but it's rarely admired. The man who always says what she expects, who always responds how she anticipates, becomes emotionally transparent. And once you're emotionally transparent, you're no longer captivating. You become a routine, not a revelation. Nietzsche would say that man should not seek to be understood. He should seek to become impossible to categorize. Because what cannot be neatly boxed in cannot be controlled. And what cannot be controlled becomes magnetic. Women are wired to test boundaries, not out of malice, but instinct. They want to feel who you are beneath your words. If every interaction with you is linear, if your emotional reactions are completely mapped out, she loses tension. Tension is the root of attraction. It's the uncertainty that keeps her engaged, watching, adjusting, guessing. Predictability dulls this. It erodes mystery. It turns "who is he" into "I know exactly what he'll say." But the man who cannot be easily predicted holds her attention longer. He's calm when most would be reactive. He disappears without explanation, not to play games, but because he's living something real. He listens more than he speaks. He smiles at accusations instead of defending himself. He doesn't always text back immediately, not because he's being cold, but because he's occupied with things that don't revolve around her. That unpredictability isn't chaos. It's intentional control, the ability to restrain your reactions, to keep your emotional cards close, to move when it makes sense to you, not when you feel pressured to reassure or entertain. That's what makes her study you, what makes her replay your words, what makes her wonder what you're thinking when you say less, because now there's space for her imagination. And imagination is more powerful than any verbal declaration. Nietzsche believed in becoming, not being. The man who is always becoming is unpredictable, not because he's erratic, but because he is not finished. He surprises not by force, but by depth. Every time she thinks she knows him, he reveals another layer, not by explaining, but by living it. That's what stirs admiration. Not consistency in expression, but consistency in growth. This doesn't mean being confusing for the sake of power. It means being full, living so richly and independently that no one ever fully grasps what fuels you. Being the man who's passionate without being reckless, who's available without being dependent, who's intimate without being owned. Women admire what they cannot predict, because unpredictability suggests freedom, and freedom is rare. The moment she feels she has complete control over you, even emotionally, the dynamic shifts. Not because she's cruel, but because control eliminates polarity. It kills the chase. It replaces curiosity with comfort. And comfort, unchecked, breeds indifference. So don't aim to be the perfectly reassuring man. Be the compelling one, the one who listens and watches more than he reacts, the one who keeps a part of himself unrevealed, the one who remains slightly ahead, always becoming, never fully held. Because when she cannot predict you, she cannot forget you, and that's when admiration becomes obsession. Weakness doesn't repel her. It simply disappears in her perception. It becomes background noise, like static on a screen she's no longer watching. That's the real danger. Most men think that showing weakness will make them less desirable, and while that's partly true, the more brutal truth is this: weakness doesn't even register. It doesn't earn scorn. It earns nothing. It's not hated. It's just ignored. In her eyes, you're no longer in the frame. Nietzsche believed that the opposite of strength isn't frailty. It's irrelevance. A man without presence, without intensity, without a center of gravity, becomes psychologically transparent. And when a man becomes transparent, the feminine instinct simply doesn't respond. Because women don't seek perfection. They seek feeling. They seek an emotional experience, a force, a shape to respond to. Weakness provides none of that. It doesn't challenge. It doesn't inspire. It doesn't provoke any movement in her nervous system. It just blurs. This is why men who constantly apologize, over-explain, and shrink themselves in the name of emotional safety become forgettable. Not because they're bad men, not because they lack value, but because they lack impact. They enter the room and change nothing. They speak and nothing shifts. They exist without leaving a mark. And for the feminine, that's a death sentence for desire. Real presence is felt before a word is spoken. It's in the way you walk, the way you occupy space, the way your eyes remain still while others shift. None of that requires loudness or bravado. It requires depth, a rooted sense of self, a man who knows where he's going and refuses to be moved by shallow winds. Weakness, when worn as identity, makes a man malleable. She senses that your tone will change based on her mood, that your plans will bend to her comfort, that your energy exists only in reaction to her own, and while she might tolerate this for a time, she will never admire it, because what's invisible cannot be respected, and what isn't respected cannot be desired. This isn't about hiding your struggle. It's about not leading with it. Every man suffers. Every man breaks, falters, bleeds in silence at some point. But what separates the unforgettable from the invisible is what he does with that pain. If you turn your weakness into discipline, into philosophy, into sharp, quiet power, then you don't disappear. You emerge. Your scars become part of your gravity, not your apology. Nietzsche admired the man who transforms, who uses weakness as raw material, not as an excuse for inaction. So if you feel unseen, it's not because you're not good enough. It's because you're not moving in a way that commands attention. Visibility doesn't come from noise. It comes from force, from decisiveness, from boundaries, from silence that holds weight. Weakness isn't unattractive. It's invisible. And the moment you become invisible in her mind, there is no path back, except through evolution. Become someone she has to look at twice, not because you shout, but because your presence makes ignoring you impossible. A man without values is a man without a center. He may look confident, he may sound articulate, but beneath the surface, there's no foundation, only reaction. He becomes whatever the moment demands, bending his personality to fit in, to be liked, to avoid friction. And nowhere is this more dangerous than in a relationship. Because if you don't have clear, lived values, you will inevitably begin to orbit hers. Not because she forces you, but because you don't have anything stronger pulling you in a different direction. Nietzsche saw this weakness clearly. He believed that those without self-created principles were condemned to live by someone else's. And that's what most men do. They hand over the compass and let her decide the map. Her emotions become his truth. Her opinions become his beliefs. Her approval becomes his source of meaning. This isn't partnership, it's passive assimilation. Orbiting her values looks like subtle things. Agreeing with things you don't actually believe, suppressing opinions that might cause conflict, adopting her habits, abandoning your rituals. You don't do it all at once, it happens gradually. But each time you defer to her worldview, you chip away at your own. And the worst part? She can feel it. She senses that your center is soft, that you're easy to sway, that you don't lead, you follow the emotional weather. At first, this might make her feel powerful, but soon it will bore her. Women don't admire men who morph to fit them. They admire men who invite them into a higher standard. A man with values is unshakable in the face of disagreement. He doesn't force others to conform. He simply refuses to abandon his structure, and that structure becomes magnetic. It becomes something she can test, lean against, even argue with, and still trust. Having values doesn't mean you're inflexible. It means you've thought about who you are and what you will and won't allow. It means you've chosen your priorities, not because they're easy, but because they reflect your identity. And when a man lives that way, he becomes predictable in principle, even if unpredictable in action. She may not always agree with you, but she'll know you won't betray your own path to keep her. Orbiting her values might keep the peace for a while, but eventually it will cost you her respect. Because what she's really watching for is your spine, your convictions, your direction. And if she doesn't see that, she'll fill the space with her own. She'll start running the relationship, not because she wants to, but because someone has to. And the moment that happens, the polarity collapses. Nietzsche Q would say, create your own values and then live them visibly. Don't just talk about discipline, show up for it. Don't just preach honesty, live it even when it's inconvenient. And don't apologize for your standards. The man who lives by his own values cannot be absorbed into someone else's identity. He becomes his own orbit. And when you are the gravity, people stop spinning you. Including her, speed reveals intent. When you rush to respond to her message, rush to defend yourself, rush to explain your feelings, you expose more than words. You expose need. Urgency, especially in emotional or romantic dynamics, often signals desperation. Nietzsche would argue that the man who cannot control his timing is already owned. Owned not by her, but by his own fear of being misunderstood, ignored, or left behind. A man who takes his time is a man who thinks, who chooses, who isn't a servant to impulse. And that kind of man becomes unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a powerful one, because when you delay your response, you create space. And space is what builds tension. Space is where interpretation lives. When she sends a message and you don't instantly reply, she feels it. Her mind begins to fill in the blanks. Is he busy? Is he with someone? Did I say too much? She starts to reflect, to wait, to wonder. And that wonder is the birthplace of admiration. But when you respond within seconds, always available, always ready, you train her to see you as emotionally on call. Not because she's cruel, but because humans adapt to what is consistent. Instant replies become the new baseline. She doesn't feel the weight of your attention anymore. It becomes background noise. And with it, your value in her psychological world begins to fade. Taking your time doesn't mean playing games. It means living on your own rhythm. If you're mid-workout, stay in the workout. If you're focused on a task, don't break it to respond. If you're upset, breathe before speaking. Because timing isn't just about delay, it's about control. And control over your time, your attention, and your words is what makes you a presence she can respect, not just react to. Fast responses often stem from fear. The fear of disappointing her, the fear of missing an opportunity, the fear of not being seen as available or attentive. But those fears are exactly what strip you of your edge. Nietzsche would call this a form of inner slavery, a man ruled by external reaction, not internal will. True power means being able to say, I will speak when I am ready, not when you expect, not when you pressure, but when I choose. This applies in all communication. In arguments, the man who takes a pause before answering owns the room. His silence forces others to wait, to lean in. He doesn't flinch, doesn't rush to fill awkward gaps. He holds the frame. That pause is more powerful than any clever comeback. In the digital world, it's even more critical. Texts, calls, messages, these are all modern signals of status. If you're always available, you're subconsciously telling her, "My schedule bends to your presence." And once that's known, it's no longer respected. So take your time. Respond when it's aligned, not when it's expected. Because speed is for the desperate. And you're not here to chase. You're here to lead, on your time. The moment you try to be the man she wants, you begin molding yourself into her expectations. You start editing your behavior, filtering your thoughts, and sculpting your personality based on what you think she desires. And ironically, the more you adjust yourself to fit her image, the less she desires you. Because she doesn't want to be handed a mirror of her fantasies. She wants to be drawn into something unknown. She wants to experience a man who surprises her, unsettles her, awakens something she can't quite name. She doesn't want to define you. She wants to figure you out and never completely succeed. When you try to be the man she wants, you become predictable. You laugh when you're supposed to. You agree when it keeps the peace. You talk about your emotions just enough to seem vulnerable, but not enough to risk rejection. And while it may win short-term affection, it slowly kills the very tension that sustains attraction. Because that tension is born from mystery, from depth, from contradiction, from being a man she can't wrap her mind around, not because you're confusing, but because you're multidimensional. Nietzsche would have called this the tragedy of conformity, the slow suicide of self in the pursuit of external approval. When you live to be liked, you cease to be real. And once you abandon authenticity for admiration, you don't become more attractive, you become less human. She doesn't want a perfectly shaped persona. She wants an experience, a man who lives on the edge of chaos and composure, who is thoughtful but not tame, grounded but not immovable, present but not possessive. The man she can't define doesn't seek to impress. He seeks to express. He doesn't deliver scripted lines. He speaks from truth, even when it disrupts the moment. He laughs when he's amused, not when it's socially required. He leads with principle, not emotional compliance. And every time she thinks she understands him, he reveals a new layer, not as a performance, but as a byproduct of constant evolution. This doesn't mean being aloof or emotionally distant. It means refusing to let your identity become a reaction to her preferences. It means being so rooted in who you are that you can walk away from the comfort of her approval without hesitation. Because your compass isn't her mood, it's your mission. And that's what makes her stay, not because she controls you, but because she can't fully predict you. You're not dangerous in a reckless way, but in a way that reminds her, this man answers only to himself, and that level of sovereignty is irresistible. So stop asking what kind of man she wants. That path leads to mediocrity. Instead, ask, what kind of man demands her full attention without needing her full understanding? Then become him, and let her chase the answer, one layer at a time. Desire thrives in space. It lives in the unspoken, the unanswered, the unknown. The more room you give her to imagine, the more power you hold. But when you're always there, always texting, always calling, always explaining, something dies. Not love, not affection, but longing. And longing is what keeps attraction alive. Nietzsche understood that too much closeness breeds contempt, not in a hateful sense, but in a diminishing sense. What is constantly available loses its weight. The human mind needs contrast, presence and absence, voice and silence, attention and mystery. When you're always in her inbox, always responding within seconds, always sharing everything, you collapse that contrast. You become emotional wallpaper, comfortable, familiar, but invisible. Distance, on the other hand, creates value. It forces her to think. It pulls her attention inward. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're with, what's going through your mind. That wondering is not weakness. It's emotional investment. It's what transforms liking into craving. And craving doesn't come from knowing. It comes from not knowing, from sensing that something meaningful exists just beyond reach. This isn't about playing games. It's about living in your own rhythm. A man with a mission naturally creates distance, not because he's avoiding her, but because he's consumed by his purpose. He's not available all day because he's building, refining, becoming. And when he does return, when his presence is felt, it lands with gravity. Not because he made her wait, but because his time means something. Overexposure, on the other hand, feels good in the moment. It feels like closeness, like intimacy, but it chips away at your mystique. She stops being curious. She starts expecting. What once sparked surprise becomes routine. What once made her lean in now makes her scroll past. And worst of all, she stops missing you, because there's no room to. Think about anything you admire, a rare painting, a sacred ritual, a powerful speech. None of these things happen every day. They're spaced. They're protected. Their value is preserved by scarcity. And when they do appear, people pause. They feel something. But if that same speech played on repeat every morning, if that same painting hung in every hallway, it would blend into the background. Desire would fade, not from dislike, but from familiarity fatigue. In relationships, distance keeps the spark alive. It doesn't mean vanishing or withholding affection. It means not flooding her system. Let her feel the pull of your absence. Let her come toward you. Let her sit with silence instead of filling every gap. If she's always emotionally full, there's no room for you to enter with impact. Nietzsche's ideal man is one who commands attention without chasing it, who can withdraw without apology, who understands that proximity doesn't equal intimacy, and that space is what makes presence feel powerful. So, take space, create distance, and let desire stretch its arms toward you. Because when you are always near, she stops reaching. But when you are felt in absence, she moves. And that movement is where real desire begins. Playing it safe feels smart, feels mature, feels like the responsible thing to do. You avoid conflict. You don't rock the boat. You say the right things. You give her what she wants, or what you think she wants. You keep the peace, stay agreeable, suppress your edge. But here's the brutal truth. She'll never say thank you for it. She won't admire it. She won't respect it. And eventually, she won't feel anything toward it. Nietzsche would call this the sickness of the agreeable man, the one who amputates his sharpness for acceptance. He becomes so careful, so well-behaved, that he loses all tension. And without tension, there is no polarity. Without polarity, there is no desire. The problem with playing it safe is that it creates emotional neutrality. You stop leading. You start following, not openly, but passively, by default. You ask her what she wants before stating what you believe. You check her reaction before forming your own. You become her echo, not her challenge. And while she may not push back, her instincts are registering something deeper. This man cannot hold the frame. When you always agree, always comply, always put harmony above truth, you start disappearing, not physically, but energetically. Your opinions blur. Your presence fades. She no longer feels the weight of your no or the direction of your yes. You become a man who pleases instead of a man who decides. And no woman falls in love with a decisionless man. Playing it safe is not noble, it's fearful. It's the fear of being disliked, of being abandoned, of being seen as too much. But here's the irony. The more you try to be liked, the less compelling you become. Women don't admire men who blend in. They admire men who stand out, who take a stance, risk disapproval, speak with conviction. The man who can calmly say, "I don't agree," or "that doesn't work for me," without flinching, that's the man who commands attention. She may argue with you. She may test you. She may call you difficult. But underneath that tension is respect. And respect is the soil from which desire grows. She'll never thank you for agreeing with everything she says. She'll never look back and admire the man who was always available, always nice, always cautious. She'll remember the one who challenged her, the one who stood firm, the one who said, "This is who I am, and I'm not editing it to win you." Playing it safe is also emotionally expensive. You suppress your truth. You build quiet resentment. You perform instead of live. And one day, when the relationship dies, you're left wondering what went wrong. You did everything right, except the one thing that mattered, being real. Nietzsche didn't respect the man who played small to keep others comfortable. He respected the one who spoke with fire, walked with edge, lived with danger. Not recklessness, but authenticity. So stop expecting gratitude for your silence, your softness, your safety. She won't thank you for becoming invisible. She'll thank the man who showed her something real, even when it wasn't easy to swallow. The nice guy believes he's playing the long game. He thinks his patience, his constant availability, his agreeable nature will be rewarded in the end. He avoids conflict, suppresses his opinions, and stays emotionally soft, hoping that kindness alone will buy him loyalty and love. But it never does. Because while society praises niceness on the surface, underneath, it forgets the men who never stood for anything. The truth is, every nice guy dies forgotten, not because he lacked morals, but because he lacked impact. Nietzsche saw through the illusion of virtue. He believed that morality, when not grounded in strength and individuality, becomes a prison. The nice guy lives in that prison. He plays by invisible rules he didn't write. He seeks to please everyone, and in doing so becomes nothing in particular. He isn't feared, admired, or even remembered. He's just agreeable. And agreeable men don't change the world. They don't lead. They don't attract. They blend in. A nice guy never polarizes. He never takes a bold stance or makes people uncomfortable. He doesn't say what he thinks. He says what he believes will cause the least amount of friction. But friction is what sharpens character. Tension is what forges desire. You don't want everyone to like you. You want the right people to feel your presence. But the nice guy would rather be mildly tolerated by everyone than fiercely remembered by a few. In relationships, this is fatal. The nice guy thinks that saying yes, being emotionally available 24/7, and never challenging her opinions is how you win a woman's heart. But women don't fall for predictability. They fall for gravity, for depth, for conviction. The man who never challenges, never disrupts, never leads, he becomes emotionally invisible. She may say she wants a nice guy, but her actions chase the man who carries edge. And the nice guy can't fake edge, because edge requires self-respect. Being nice is not the same as being good. Goodness requires strength. Niceness requires approval. The nice guy will compromise his values just to avoid being disliked. He'll abandon his standards just to maintain peace. But peace without truth is emotional death. You cannot respect a man who bends at every breeze. And if you can't respect him, you can't desire him. Every nice guy dies forgotten because he leaves no fingerprint on the world. He never disrupts, never disagrees with conviction, never walks away from what disrespects him. He tolerates more than he should and expresses less than he feels. And when he finally breaks, when the weight of inauthenticity crushes him, it's too late. No one was watching. No one was listening, because he trained the world to ignore him. So choose to be dangerously kind, not passively nice. Be firm in your standards. Be clear in your truth. Let your no carry weight. Let your presence shift rooms. Because nice is forgettable, but real is unforgettable. And Nietzsche knew, the world doesn't remember the agreeable. It remembers the ones who stood firm even when it cost them comfort. Her silence is never empty. It's not just the absence of words. It's a reflection of everything that's unsaid, unnoticed, or unresolved. Most men panic when she goes quiet. They scramble to fill the void, to fix it, to beg for clarity. But Nietzsche would suggest something different. Let her silence be your mirror. Not a problem to solve, but a signal to observe. Because in that silence, she's telling you something about you, your presence, your behavior, your energy. The question is, can you sit still long enough to hear it? When a woman stops speaking, it's rarely because she has nothing to say. It's because she wants you to see something. Maybe she's testing your emotional strength. Maybe she's withdrawing because you've overstepped or underdelivered. Maybe she's gauging how much of your self-worth is tied to her approval. In any case, silence becomes a strategy, and your reaction to it reveals more than any conversation could. Most men rush in. They over-communicate, over-apologize, over-explain. They try to force closeness where there's resistance, but that desperation only amplifies the silence. It confirms her suspicions, that you're afraid of disconnection, that you lack internal grounding, that you need her attention to feel stable. And once she sees that, respect begins to leak. Not because you're cruel or careless, but because you're insecure. But the man who uses her silence as a mirror doesn't flinch. He observes. He reflects. He asks, what am I doing or not doing that makes this space necessary for her? More importantly, he doesn't seek immediate resolution. He allows the distance to clarify the dynamic. He lets the silence work. This isn't about indifference. It's about awareness. Her silence might be a call for you to lead more firmly, to say no with your chest, to stop flooding her with energy she didn't ask for. Or maybe it's an invitation to pull back so she can come forward. When you use her silence as your mirror, you stop asking, why isn't she talking? And start asking, what is my energy saying that words don't need to? Nietzsche believed in the power of reflection over reaction. He valued solitude, internal honesty, and the ability to extract meaning from discomfort. Her silence is discomfort, but it's also a chance to see yourself without filters, without performance, without noise. And if you can sit with that and not collapse into emotional chaos, you earn a new kind of strength, stillness under pressure. Eventually, she may speak again. She may return to softness. But how she returns will depend on how you handled the silence. Did you become a boy begging for comfort? Or did you remain a man who watched, listened, and adjusted without losing himself? Silence is not punishment. It's information. It's reflection. And it's power for the man who knows how to look into it without looking away. Use it. Study it. Let it sharpen your awareness. Because the man who learns from her silence never has to beg for her words. He earns them with presence alone. The fear of losing her is one of the most potent forms of psychological leverage. It's not always spoken. She doesn't have to say, "I'll leave." She doesn't have to threaten, raise her voice, or even walk away. Often it's far more subtle, a delayed reply, a withdrawn tone, a shift in affection. These micro-behaviors trigger something ancient in you: the fear of abandonment, the panic of rejection, the need to repair. And that fear? That's where the control begins. Nietzsche would point to this as a corruption of power rooted in dependency. When a man lives in fear of losing something, especially a woman, he begins to negotiate with his soul. He adjusts his truth. He weakens his tone. He shifts from leader to appeaser. Suddenly, he's no longer making choices based on values or purpose. He's making them based on preservation, preserving the connection, preserving the comfort, preserving her approval. This fear doesn't manifest in obvious ways. It's in the way you ask for permission instead of stating decisions, in the way you tiptoe around her moods, in how you avoid confrontation just to keep the peace. You may even tell yourself it's love, but love built on fear is just codependence in disguise, and she can feel it. Women are incredibly sensitive to power dynamics, especially the ones they don't have to ask for. When she senses that your behavior changes because you're afraid to lose her, she knows she's no longer in your orbit. You're now in hers. And here's the paradox. The more you fear losing her, the more likely you are to lose her. Because fear makes you predictable, controllable, and, eventually, forgettable. The man who cannot walk away, who cannot hold frame in the face of emotional storms, loses his edge. And that edge is what maintains respect. But when a man is rooted in purpose, that fear disappears. Not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't need. He wants her, but he doesn't chase. He values connection, but he doesn't surrender his identity for it. He's not afraid of loss because he knows what can be taken by pressure was never real to begin with. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming sovereign. A sovereign man isn't reckless with love. He's disciplined in it. He's willing to show affection, vulnerability, even pain, but never at the cost of self-respect. And if she pulls away, tests boundaries, threatens absence, he doesn't crumble. He watches, he listens, he lets space reveal truth. Because he knows the only relationships worth keeping are the ones that don't require self-abandonment to maintain. Fear of loss is natural. But acting from that fear is a choice. And it's a choice that slowly erodes your power, your clarity, your masculinity. The antidote? Detachment, not from emotion, but from outcome. When you no longer fear losing her, you finally stop being controlled by her. And that's when real attraction begins, when you love her deeply, but you love your mission more. Apologies are not inherently weak. In fact, when used properly, they show maturity and accountability. But when a man apologizes too soon, before reflection, before clarity, or worse, before he's even sure he did something wrong, he trains her to see him as uncertain, guilt-prone, and easy to manipulate. Over time, this behavior doesn't soothe her. It erodes her respect for him. Nietzsche understood that power and perception are closely linked. A man who moves too quickly to apologize is often not correcting behavior out of principle, but seeking to regain favor. It's an emotional transaction. Let me say sorry fast enough so you won't be upset. But beneath that apology is fear. Fear of disconnection, fear of rejection, fear of losing his place in her emotional world. And fear, once detected, changes how she sees you. When a man consistently apologizes without conviction, it signals that he doesn't trust his own judgment. He places her emotional state above his internal compass. This breeds imbalance. You become the one always trying to fix, smooth, and repair, even in moments when you weren't wrong. And once she sees that you're more committed to avoiding discomfort than standing your ground, she stops looking to you for leadership. Worse, she begins to test you more, not necessarily out of cruelty, but out of instinct. She wants to feel your strength, not just physically or emotionally, but morally. She wants to know you have a line, that you won't bend just because she's upset. And if you keep bending, she'll keep pushing, until one day there's nothing left to push against. That's when admiration dies. This doesn't mean you should be stubborn or refuse to apologize when you've clearly caused harm. The key isn't never apologizing. It's not apologizing too fast. A man of strength pauses. He evaluates. He asks, was I out of alignment with my values? Not, did she frown? Or, is she pulling away? He apologizes when it's earned, not when it's demanded by emotion. The timing of an apology matters. An immediate, reflexive "I'm sorry" weakens your presence. A grounded, thoughtful "I was wrong and here's why" commands respect. The former seeks to pacify. The latter expresses integrity. If you apologize to stop her from being angry, you've already submitted. You've made her emotions the judge of your character. But if you withhold apology until you've truly examined yourself, she learns something far more important, that you're not a puppet to her moods. You're a man with inner order. Train her to respect you by showing that your words, especially your apologies, carry weight. Don't let "I'm sorry" become the price you pay to maintain peace. Let it be the confirmation of your own standard, not her emotional leverage. Because once she learns that all it takes is silence, tension, or a frown to extract your surrender, the dynamic is no longer equal. It becomes performance. And no woman truly loves the man who's always auditioning for her approval. She loves the one who moves from truth, not fear, who apologizes when it matters, and only then. Consistency makes you dependable, but predictability makes you dull. The man who is always available, always online, always ready with a reply, slowly becomes part of the background noise. He removes the unknown. He removes the wonder. And once you remove wonder, you've removed desire. Women don't crave what they fully understand. They crave mystery, the space to imagine, to question, to long for. Nietzsche would argue that desire lives not in presence, but in the tension of absence. Disappearing unpredictably is not about playing games. It's about restoring imbalance in a way that seduces. It means you're not emotionally on call. You don't operate on her schedule. You're not addicted to the dopamine loop of constant texting. You vanish, not with anger, not with drama, with calmness. You vanish into your life, into your purpose, your work, your solitude. You allow the silence to grow. You let the uncertainty build. And then when you return, you don't explain. You don't offer a detailed account. You return mysteriously, with a calm energy, a subtle shift in tone, a look in your eye that says you've been somewhere she wasn't invited. That's what triggers curiosity. That's what stirs her imagination. Because she starts to ask, what was he doing? Who was he with? Why didn't he tell me? And those questions aren't threats. They're hooks. Hooks that pull her deeper into your world without you needing to pull at all. Most men are terrified of disappearing. They believe they need to stay relevant by staying present. But the truth is, overexposure kills polarity. She doesn't miss what's always there. She doesn't fantasize about what's easily accessible. But the man who disappears, who leaves a void, becomes a story in her mind. She fills in the blanks with emotion, memory, tension. And when he returns without apology, with quiet power, she doesn't feel rejection. She feels intrigue. This doesn't mean being inconsistent in values. It means being unavailable in rhythm. It means you're not governed by emotional demands. You don't answer just because she reached out. You don't justify your pauses. You let your absence speak. And when you come back, you're not seeking approval. You bring with you a new layer, an insight, an accomplishment, a shift in energy that makes her look at you again with new eyes. Nietzsche believed in becoming, in constantly evolving, in stepping away from the herd to forge identity. Your disappearance is part of that forging. It says, I do not orbit you. I have a life so compelling, I forget to explain it. And that's what makes you dangerous, not in a reckless sense, but in a magnetic one. A man who can disappear without fear and return without explanation commands more attention than one who is always visible. Because the unknown is more powerful than the known, and a woman who wonders about you is a woman who remembers you. So vanish. Not for revenge, not to manipulate, but to grow. And when you return, don't explain. Let your energy say what your words never will. You cannot be possessed. You can only be experienced. A man who is easily understood becomes easily dismissed. When she can read you like a diary, knowing what you'll say, how you'll react, when you'll cave, she stops feeling challenged. The tension vanishes, and with it, so does the depth of her desire. Women don't long for certainty. They long for something to figure out, something that stimulates their emotional and intellectual curiosity. And the man who gives her everything, his feelings, his thoughts, his patterns, removes the game, the pursuit, the puzzle. He becomes emotionally flat, predictable, safe, and eventually invisible. Nietzsche valued depth over clarity. He warned against becoming too legible, too transparent. Because when a person is fully defined, there's no need to engage with them deeply. The mystery vanishes. And that mystery is where connection deepens. The more you allow her to guess, the more you compel her attention. Not through deception, but through dimensionality. You don't need to act mysterious. You need to become complex. The unsolvable riddle is not a man who plays games. He's not manipulative or cryptic for sport. He simply refuses to be fully decoded. He has inner worlds she'll never access. Ideas he doesn't explain. Emotions he processes alone. Purpose she can witness, but not direct. She can spend months with him and still feel like she's only scratched the surface. That kind of man, unfolding in layers, unpredictable in movement, creates a gravitational pull. On the other hand, the predictable diary man always talks. He narrates his every mood. He overshares, overtexts, overexplains. He thinks honesty is pouring himself out in full. But what he's really doing is erasing contrast. He becomes static, comfortable, and ultimately unmemorable. You don't owe her your full internal monologue. You don't have to explain every decision. Speak less than you feel, act more than you promise. And let her learn about you not through words, but through time. That's what makes her lean in. That's what makes her invest. This doesn't mean withholding love. It means protecting your depths. Let her earn access to the next layer. Let her sit in curiosity. Because the more she knows there's more to know, the more she returns. Not out of obligation, but fascination. Nietzsche's ideal man was one who defied simple definitions. He called for the overman, the man who transcends the categories given to him. In love, that translates into a man who cannot be boxed, who isn't just the provider or the good guy or the romantic. He's all of it, and more, but never all at once, never on demand. So stop trying to be understood. Stop trying to be liked through transparency. Become someone whose thoughts evolve, whose energy shifts, whose boundaries protect something sacred. Be warm, but not available at every emotional impulse. Be present, but not explainable. Because once she solves you, she shelves you. But when you're a living riddle, when your eyes say more than your words and your actions carry hidden weight, she doesn't forget you. She studies you. And in that study, desire never dies. Nietzsche's warning, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded," is not just philosophical poetry. It's a brutal psychological truth. A man who lacks inner command, who does not govern his impulses, emotions, and direction, will always end up following something outside himself. It may be a woman, a social expectation, a cultural script, or even a manipulative ideology. But one way or another, he will bend to a force greater than his own will. Self-command is the foundation of masculine power. Without it, you become reactive, shifting your behavior to avoid discomfort, seeking validation in relationships, living moment to moment based on how others treat you. You apologize when you aren't wrong. You chase what walks away. You lower your standards to keep peace. And worst of all, you resent yourself for it. Because deep down, every man knows when he's betraying his own throne. To obey yourself means you have a personal code that governs you independent of circumstance. You wake when you said you would. You train even when you don't feel like it. You stay silent when tempted to explain yourself. You walk away from disrespect without drama. You don't need her to give you permission to lead. You lead because it is your nature. And this is where power is born, not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself so completely that external control becomes irrelevant. You can't be manipulated when you don't fear rejection. You can't be shamed when you stand by your choices. You can't be guilted into submission when you've already judged your actions by your own standard. Nietzsche's idea is simple. Either you are ruled by you, or you are ruled by someone else. There is no third option. Most men skip this truth. They blame her for being controlling, society for being oppressive, circumstances for being hard. But what they're really saying is, I have no personal order. I wait for someone else to give me structure. And when you hand over the reins of your discipline, you hand over the reins of your destiny. The man who obeys himself doesn't need to dominate others. He simply cannot be pulled into games, distractions, or emotional chaos. He becomes magnetic, not because he demands attention, but because his life is obviously self-directed. He doesn't preach authority. He embodies it. And in relationships, this makes him both respected and desired. Because a woman doesn't truly want to command you. She wants to feel that you're already commanded by something higher than her moods. She wants to see that your decisions are rooted in principle, not her reactions. When she senses that, she softens. Not because you forced her, but because you didn't need to. Self-obedience is the ultimate proof of maturity. It tells the world, I am not ruled by urges. I am not shaped by fear. I don't need external governance. I am the authority in my life. And that kind of man isn't just hard to manipulate. He's impossible to replace. Indifference is not apathy. It's not coldness or cruelty. Indifference, when wielded correctly, is power. It is the refusal to hinge your value on her approval, to make her attention the center of your emotional stability. A man who is indifferent doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't crumble when affection fades or emotions turn. He stands still, emotionally anchored, untouched by her storms. And that stability, that self-sufficiency, is magnetic. When you are indifferent, it means you are already full. You do not need her affection to feel validated, nor her praise to feel accomplished. You can enjoy her presence, even love her deeply, without making her your source of self-worth. Nietzsche would call this will to power, the strength to shape your own emotional weather rather than be shaped by it. A woman can feel when a man needs her affection. His texts drip with insecurity. His compliments are really requests for affirmation. His apologies are bribes to restore warmth. And while he believes this proves love, what it really proves is dependence. And dependence kills respect. But the man who is indifferent to the outcome, who can walk away without theatrics, who doesn't panic when the temperature drops, invokes something ancient in her. Curiosity. Why doesn't he chase me? Why is he so calm? What is he focused on that makes my approval so unnecessary? And in that wondering, attraction is reborn. Not from manipulation, but from the gravitational pull of a man who governs himself. Let her fall in love with your indifference, not because it hurts her, but because it centers you. It reminds her that your world does not spin around hers, that your time, energy, and attention are sacred currencies, given only where they are earned, not begged for, not assumed. This doesn't mean being emotionally unavailable. It means that your emotional availability is earned through mutual respect, not coerced through emotional games. If she withdraws, you don't chase. If she tests, you don't flinch. You observe, you stay composed, and you let her feel the absence of your attention. And when she returns, she knows that she's stepping into the presence of a man who cannot be shaken by silence or seduced by chaos. This kind of man, rooted, sovereign, focused, is rare. He doesn't just win love. He commands loyalty. Because a woman cannot emotionally dominate a man who doesn't need to be emotionally rescued. She can't manipulate a man who doesn't fear loss. And she can't confuse a man whose clarity runs deeper than her moods. Let her fall in love with your indifference, not because it makes you cold, but because it proves you're complete. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose. You are not a servant of desire. You are the architect of it. And that truth, when embodied, makes you unforgettable. Not because you tried to be, but because you never needed to. Your edge is what makes you memorable. It's your intensity, your ambition, your focus, your ability to say no without guilt. It's the part of you that isn't softened for approval or diluted for comfort. And yet so many men unconsciously trade that edge for the illusion of harmony. They tone themselves down, they silence their fire, they compromise their drive, their boundaries, their voice, all in the hope that she'll feel more secure, more comfortable, more emotionally safe. But here's the cruel irony. The moment you trade your edge for her comfort, you become less attractive to her. What she was drawn to in the beginning wasn't how accommodating you were. It was your presence, your ability to walk into a room and not flinch, your decisiveness, your intensity, your unpredictability. These are not flaws to be smoothed out. They are assets. The edge is what makes a man compelling. It reminds her, even subconsciously, that you are governed by something larger than her, your purpose. Nietzsche didn't write for men who wanted to be domesticated. He spoke to the man who wanted to become. The Übermensch, the man beyond man, doesn't shape himself around what makes others comfortable. He shapes himself around his becoming, his highest ideal, and in doing so, he remains dangerous, not in the sense of cruelty, but in the sense of being untamable. Women might say they want a man who's easy, gentle, and always agreeable. But if you listen carefully, you'll realize what they respond to is a man who can remain centered in the storm, a man who can hold his edge even when it creates tension, not out of ego, but out of alignment. The edge isn't there to hurt her, it's there to lead her, to remind her that she is in the presence of someone who can feel deeply and still decide clearly. When you dull your edge, you become predictable, safe, emotionally inert. You stop challenging her. You stop leading yourself. And in that process, she stops feeling the spark. Not because she's ungrateful, but because you removed the very energy that activated her feminine core. Polarity. Polarity thrives on difference, on tension, on contrast. If both of you are soft, indecisive, overly nurturing, then there is no voltage. If you're always making sure she's comfortable, even at the cost of your truth, then she will never fully trust you. Because a man who won't fight for his edge won't fight for anything. And deep down, she knows that. Retaining your edge doesn't mean being rigid. It means being unshakable in your essence. It means saying, "This is who I am, and I won't apologize for evolving." It means holding your ground when it would be easier to please. It means embracing discomfort, not as punishment, but as proof that you are still growing. So don't trade your edge for peace. Don't flatten your power to avoid conflict. Let her feel the sharpness of your presence, not to dominate her, but to anchor her. Because when a woman trusts a man's edge, she doesn't fear the world. She feels protected from it. And more importantly, she respects him for never laying down his sword just to win her smile. Certainty kills tension. When a woman knows exactly how you feel at all times in all situations, there's no mystery left. And without mystery, there is no gravity, no desire, no anticipation. She settles into emotional comfort, and comfort eventually turns into boredom. Nietzsche might say, what is fully known is no longer alive. So if you want to remain unforgettable, don't always reassure her. Don't smother her with constant affirmation. Instead, give her space, just enough to wonder. Let her sit in that silence, not because you're punishing her, but because you're living in your own current. You're not withdrawing affection. You're not becoming cold. You're simply not handing out constant validation like a drug. The moment she becomes emotionally full, she stops reaching. When there's no uncertainty, no question in her mind about where she stands with you, she stops pursuing the depth of your presence. And when she stops reaching, the polarity dies. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking the pattern of emotional predictability. If she always knows how to get a reaction, if you're always the one affirming, explaining, and proving your love, she loses the opportunity to feel it on her own terms. But when you take a step back, emotionally, physically, or even verbally, she's left with herself, with her thoughts, with her curiosity. Did he change? Did I lose something? Have I taken him for granted? Those questions are not emotional manipulation. They're emotional activation. They stir something deeper than pleasure, value. She reflects on what she has, what she risks losing, and what your presence actually means in her life. And in that space, real desire is reborn, not out of fear, but out of awareness. The man who gives a woman space to wonder is the man who knows she cannot love him deeply without respecting him first. And respect isn't born in constant access. It's born in contrast, in knowing that he can love her fully yet still disappear into himself, that he can hold her at night and still wake up to pursue his own mission without apology. She doesn't want to own you. She wants to be invited back into your orbit again and again, not out of obligation, but out of choice. When she knows she has you, with no risk, no mystery, no silence, no solitude, she stops valuing that invitation. She assumes it, and what is assumed is soon dismissed. So let her feel absence. Let her sit in uncertainty, not out of cruelty, but because you respect her ability to rise into it. Don't chase after every emotional wobble. Don't patch every silence with sweet words. Let her earn your attention, just as you earn hers. Nietzsche understood the beauty of distance, the echo between hearts, the space that makes return feel sacred. When she wonders if your love is fading, she's not losing you. She's rediscovering you. And that rediscovery keeps her engaged, not just with you, but with the depth of her own desire. There's a difference between vulnerability and exposure. Vulnerability is conscious. It's earned. It's shared selectively with those who respect your strength. But exposure, emotional bleeding in front of anyone and everyone, is dangerous, especially in front of someone who might enjoy the sight. Because not everyone around you wants you whole. Some want you broken because it makes them feel bigger, stronger, or more in control. Nietzsche would say, be careful who you suffer in front of, because some will not help you. They will feed on your weakness. In a world that preaches emotional openness, it's easy to forget this distinction. Men are told to be more expressive, more open, more emotionally available. And while there's truth in emotional honesty, there's also a shadow. When you reveal your pain too easily, too quickly, or to the wrong person, you invite disrespect, not empathy. Because not everyone sees your tears as sacred. Some see them as leverage. Others see them as permission to diminish you. This is especially true in relationships where emotional power is constantly shifting. If you reveal your deepest wounds in the wrong moment, when she's angry, when she's testing you, when she hasn't earned that level of trust, you don't gain closeness. You lose stature. The protector becomes the one who needs protecting. And if that moment happens too soon or too often, her subconscious will register something. You cannot carry both of you. This doesn't mean you suppress pain. It means you guard your inner temple. You process in private or with those who can hold space. You cry, but you cry with discipline. You feel, but you filter. Because emotional strength isn't about hiding weakness. It's about deciding who deserves to see it. There are people, lovers, friends, even family, who are uncomfortable with your strength. When you bleed, they feel more in control. When you crumble, they feel more stable. And if you continue to expose your wounds in front of them, you train them to view you as less than, not because they're evil, but because they're unequipped to handle your depth. And in their discomfort, they may respond with mockery, withdrawal, or manipulation. A powerful man understands this. You don't show the battlefield until the war is over. You speak of pain in past tense, not present breakdown. You share scars, not open wounds. And you do it only when your story uplifts, not when it seeks to be rescued. Nietzsche believed suffering could forge greatness, but only when contained and transformed. Bleeding in public or in front of those who might use it against you isn't transformation. It's surrender. And once you've surrendered your emotional control, you've surrendered something greater, your sovereignty. So be honest, but be strategically honest. Guard your depth. Choose your confessions wisely, because your pain is sacred. And some people, if you hand it to them too early, will turn it into their entertainment or their excuse to disrespect you. And once that happens, you don't just lose their respect. You lose your center. Never bleed where the floor is cold and the crowd is watching. Wait for the fire. Then speak from scars, not wounds. Most men believe seduction is something you do. A technique, a game, a performance. They study lines, gestures, strategies, hoping to become more desirable by manipulating perception. But real seduction isn't something you chase. It's something that radiates as a byproduct of something greater, purpose. When you're a man on a mission, when your life is shaped by direction rather than distraction, seduction begins to unfold around you without effort. Nietzsche's idea of the will to power wasn't just about dominance. It was about creating meaning. A man with purpose doesn't live reactively. He doesn't orbit around emotional whims or become a servant to desire. He builds. And as he builds, his craft, his legacy, his identity, he becomes more than desirable. He becomes gravitational. Women don't fall for him because of what he says. They fall for the aura of momentum that surrounds him. You can spot this man immediately. He doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't beg for validation. He doesn't need to impress. His presence says, I am going somewhere. You're welcome to join, but I'm not slowing down. And that's precisely what makes him intoxicating. Because most men are chasing women, he's chasing something higher. And paradoxically, women chase him. Purpose is the great filter. It disciplines your energy, your time, and your emotions. You stop indulging in chaos because you simply don't have time for it. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't building anything. You become selective, who you see, what you say, where you go. And that selectiveness, that refusal to waste yourself, becomes deeply attractive. It tells the world, I am not accessible to everyone. I have direction. The man without purpose is easy to seduce but impossible to respect. He's always available, always seeking, always reacting. He's too quick to respond, too eager to please, too lost in the moment. His life is shaped by attraction rather than intention. And as a result, he ends up drained, confused, and eventually forgotten. But when you lead with purpose, every interaction shifts. You're not worried about what to say. You're focused on what you're becoming. You don't analyze every emotional response. You're analyzing your progress. You don't seek attention. You generate it through action. And that action, quiet, consistent, unapologetic, is what turns heads. Seduction without substance is short-lived. You might capture her attention, but you won't hold it. Because once she looks deeper and finds nothing there, she moves on. But when she sees that your attention is a reward, not a reflex, that your love is deliberate, not desperate, she doesn't just admire you. She craves you. Not because you chased her, but because you never needed to. So stop trying to be seductive. Start becoming dangerously committed to your mission. Let your passion, discipline, and growth do the talking. Because the man who wakes up with fire in his eyes and focus in his heart doesn't need to seduce. He just needs to show up. The rest follows, always. Desire thrives in mystery. It lives in the space between what is seen and what is imagined. The more a woman has to wonder about you, the more her mind becomes entangled with thoughts of you. But when you reveal everything, your thoughts, your emotions, your insecurities, your intentions, all at once, you remove the very tension that keeps her emotionally invested. What's fully revealed becomes emotionally flattened, predictable, safe, and eventually forgettable. Men often confuse transparency with connection. They believe that if they fully open up, if they pour out every feeling and tell every story, they'll be loved more deeply. But in reality, over-disclosure often signals neediness, and neediness is not intimacy, it's emotional self-abandonment. It says, here's everything I am, please like me anyway. But that's not how respect is earned. That's how attraction is diluted. Nietzsche understood the value of tension, of restraint. His philosophy didn't promote repression, but transformation. To transform energy, sexual, emotional, intellectual, into power, you must withhold enough for others to lean in, to be intrigued, to explore you over time. When you make yourself too accessible, too open, too quickly, you deny the other person the chance to discover you. And without discovery, there is no seduction. This doesn't mean you lie. It means you practice disciplined self-possession. You speak when it adds gravity. You share when it earns trust. You leave things unsaid, not out of manipulation, but out of respect for depth. When a woman knows everything about you in a week, there's no journey left. There's no growth, no surprise, no space for polarity. What draws her in is not knowing if she fully has you. It's the flicker of ambiguity in your expression. It's your silence in moments when others would over-explain. It's your ability to be emotionally available without being emotionally transparent. And that distinction makes all the difference. A man of value reveals himself slowly. Like a novel, he opens chapter by chapter, not dumping the entire plot in the prologue. He speaks less than he knows, feels more than he shows. And because of that, he creates a gravitational pull, a subtle intrigue. Women sense that there's more layers, more depth, more to uncover. And that anticipation builds emotional intensity far more than any confession ever could. In contrast, the man who reveals everything leaves nothing to wonder about. His motivations are on the table. His thoughts are always expressed. His reactions are always visible. And soon there's nothing left to chase. He becomes emotionally saturated, like a book someone skimmed too fast and never returned to. So let her earn your story. Let her feel the weight of your presence before you offer your past. Let her imagine before you confirm. Because the less you reveal, the more she will return, not out of confusion, but out of curiosity. And that curiosity is the root of long-lasting desire. Mystery is not deception, it's devotion to depth. And once you understand that, you'll stop oversharing and start commanding attention through presence alone. Fairness is a noble ideal, but it often becomes a trap for those who misunderstand power. When you insist on playing fair in a world that doesn't, you handicap yourself. You limit your movements to a moral code that others don't share. Especially in relationships, influence, and emotional dynamics, fairness rarely governs the outcome. Leverage does. To play fair is to believe the playing field is equal, but to play above is to see that the real advantage lies not in matching her rules, but in mastering your own. Nietzsche warned against moral illusions that weaken the will to power. He challenged the idea that equality is inherently virtuous. In his view, most people cling to fairness not because they're strong, but because they're afraid of dominance. They want everyone to play by the same rules so no one has to rise above. But if you are building strength, presence, and sovereignty, your path will not be symmetrical. It will not be fair. It will be elevated. In male-female dynamics, many men try to be the good guy. They play by the rules she says she wants. Constant reassurance, open vulnerability, emotional submission, endless compromise. But these men often find themselves disrespected, forgotten, or walked over. Why? Because they confuse being ethical with being predictable. They believe fairness will earn loyalty, but what it often earns is emotional leverage against them. To play above is not to manipulate, it is to transcend the script entirely. You stop reacting to her moods. You stop justifying your every move. You stop needing permission to act from your principles. You operate from a place of internal clarity, not external fairness. And in doing so, you become uncontrollable. The man who plays above doesn't argue. He acts. He doesn't seek to match her energy. He sets the tone. He doesn't try to equalize the dynamic. He leads it. And because he isn't bogged down by emotional tit-for-tats, he moves freely, with precision, with presence, with power. Playing fair often puts you in a frame of apology. Did I say the wrong thing? Is she more upset than I'm allowed to be? Have I crossed an invisible line? That mindset places you beneath her, trying to keep the scales balanced. But the man who plays above doesn't weigh outcomes on emotional scales. He builds such undeniable gravity that the dynamic orbits him. This doesn't mean ignoring her needs. It means refusing to shrink for them. You can honor her feelings without surrendering your edge. You can listen without being led. You can love her without needing to lose your center. Play above by mastering yourself. Lead the dance, not by overpowering, but by elevating. When you operate from a place she cannot destabilize, she will feel it. And though she may challenge you, she will respect you, because at the deepest level, she doesn't want fairness. She wants certainty. And only a man who plays above can provide that, not by pleasing, but by leading without apology. A common trap for men in relationships is the desire to fix, especially when it comes to a woman's insecurities. You see her pain, her doubt, her fear of abandonment or self-worth, and you step in with reassurance. You say the right things. You try to be emotionally available. You walk on eggshells to avoid triggering her. But over time, this dynamic turns against you, because the more you try to fix her insecurities, the more you unconsciously validate them. You send the message, yes, your fears are real, and it's my job to soothe them. And in doing so, you step into a role that slowly shrinks you. Nietzsche taught that we should not descend into another's suffering in the name of compassion. He believed that suffering must be overcome, not accommodated. And when it comes to a woman's insecurities, your role is not to kneel beside them. It's to grow beyond them so powerfully that they dissolve in the gravity of your presence. Insecurity is not something you argue with. It's not something you convince someone out of. It's an internal story, one she must confront and outgrow herself. And if you attempt to fight that battle for her, you rob her of the very self-respect that can only come from internal transformation. You don't heal someone by proving they're lovable. You heal someone indirectly by being so whole, so purpose-driven, so rooted in your own growth that their insecurity cannot survive in your world. To outgrow her insecurities means you no longer respond to them with overcompensation. You don't change your plans because she feels threatened. You don't repeat your loyalty 10 times a day because she's jealous. You don't over-explain your silence because she fears disconnection. Instead, you stand firm. You let your consistency speak. You become a mirror, not a medic. A mirror that reflects, this is what stability looks like. This is what confidence sounds like. This is what it means to not need validation. Women don't need men who cater to their fears. They need men who inspire their rise. If her fear is abandonment, she needs to learn how to stand alone. If her fear is being compared, she must build her own self-worth. Your job is not to make her feel perfect. Your job is to become so evolved that imperfection doesn't rattle you. That's what gives her the model of strength she never knew she needed. And if she tries to pull you into her emotional chaos through blame, guilt, or drama, you don't fight. You elevate. You say less. You remain calm. You do not apologize for your growth, your stillness, or your truth. Over time, she'll either rise to meet you or remove herself. But what you will not do is descend. Outgrowing her insecurity is not abandonment. It's leadership. It says, you are free to feel what you feel, but I will not be reduced by it. And that boundary, that quiet strength, is not just masculine, it's liberating. For you. And if she's ready, for her too. Need is the death of desire. The moment you require her love to feel whole, you surrender your power. What once was attraction becomes obligation. What once was pursuit becomes pressure. And the deeper your emotional dependence grows, the more she begins to feel the weight of your neediness, something no woman wants to carry. She may care for you. She may even pity you. But she will not desire you, because desire does not grow in the soil of need. It grows in the presence of sovereignty. The man who doesn't need her love is not cold. He is not distant. He can love her with depth, with intensity, with presence. But he loves her from overflow, not emptiness. He chooses her, but he does not cling to her. His life is already full. His mind is focused. His heart is rooted in something larger than the validation of another person. And that, paradoxically, is what makes him so alluring. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the man who transcends social dependence and creates his own values, his own meaning. In love, this archetype plays out through the man who isn't waiting for approval to feel strong. He doesn't need to be constantly reassured, praised, or held. His mission is what fuels him. His self-respect is what anchors him. And when he brings love into the equation, it's not to complete him, it's to expand him. Women are drawn to this kind of man because he radiates a silent confidence. He does not chase. He does not panic when she pulls away. He does not beg, explain, or plead. He simply remains. And in that stillness, she feels something rare, freedom. She's not responsible for his emotions. She's not pressured to perform. She can simply experience him without feeling trapped in his expectations, and that makes her want to earn him. The man who doesn't need her love is often the one who receives it the most intensely, because she knows on a deep level that his love is not reactive. It's intentional. He won't love her more if she cries louder. He won't love her less if she withdraws. He's already decided who he is, what he stands for, and how he gives. And that certainty is magnetic. Need-based love is exhausting. It demands constant maintenance, reassurance, and emotional work. But self-sufficient love is invigorating. It invites her to rise, not to rescue. It draws out her best, because she wants to match the man who doesn't need her, but still chooses her. To become that man, you must first detach from the fantasy that love will save you. No relationship will fix your brokenness. No woman will make you feel whole if you're empty inside. You must become emotionally independent, grounded, focused, and full before you offer love to anyone else. And when you do, you'll find that her love flows not because she has to, but because she can't resist the gravity of a man who would never beg for it.